Morning, glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. Hugh Hewitt live back inside the Beltway. So glad to be back inside. September is the most wonderful month in the Beltway. October and November along with them. I particularly like October because the Supreme Court comes back to town and they gear up and they start letting geeks like me listen to oral arguments that they make there. That reminds me, Alliance Defending Freedom is a great sponsor of this show and has been for years. I've often done their conferences. I've taught the Blackstone Fellows for probably 15 years now. And I lead their annual media seminar track, trying to explain the law to journalists because I'm one of the few law professors who is a journalist. And Alliance Defending Freedom runs their campaign in October, asking people across the country to sign up to defend religious liberty. So since it's Monday, if you went to church Sunday, and I don't care which church you went to, what denomination it is. You don't even have to go to any church at all because they defend atheists all the time. Or if you have a son or daughter, grandson or granddaughter, going this morning to a Christian school anywhere in the United States, would you go over to hughhewitt.com and hit the Alliance Defending Freedom button at the top? It might just say Alliance Defends. You have to let it load a little bit. And make a contribution to defend your religious liberty. They are, I believe, 14 out of 15. They've won 14 out of the 15 challenges in which they've been lead counsel at the Supreme Court. I'll talk to John Bursch later, with their head of appellate advocacy, and double-check my number. I believe they're the most effective legal defense firm in the United States. They are the opposite of the ACLU. They defend your religious liberty. And once a year I ask you, one check. Now, some of you decide I'm making that my ministry. We got 5 fingers for a reason. First finger, remind you to give to your church. Second finger, to a parachurch group. Right? The Alliance Defending Freedom qualifies, Young Life qualifies, but a parachurch group. Third one, someone who helped contribute to your education. In my case, it's John F. Kennedy High School, Warren, Ohio. Fourth one, another educational institution doing great work out. It can be ACE scholarships, it can be Hillsdale College, and then finally, a military group. Someone supporting the vets and their families or the families of the fallen. Speaking of which, I was at a John Androsik concert last night. I'll do the rundown here shortly. Five for Fighting is back on the road. I'm a little bit weary in the voice because I stayed up way too late talking to way too many people that were at John's concert in the Birchmere, Alexandria, Virginia. He's playing tonight in Annapolis, by the way, if you're driving home. The Rams head on stage in Annapolis. Great tour. He tours with his string quartet. It's a beautiful concert. He finished with Blood on My Hands, which divided the room. I mean, nobody laughed or anything like that, but only half of us stood up and applauded it. And it's an interesting thing, given the headlines today out of Afghanistan. They've hung 4 bodies in the city of Herat on construction cranes because that's the Taliban. They're back. We did that. 28 days ago, we bugged out. 28 days ago, we condemned that country to these people, and they're hanging bodies from cranes in Herat. They're also told all the barbers of Kabul, no more cutting hair, no more cutting beards. So everyone's going to have the Taliban look again in Afghanistan shortly. So we did that. That's on us. It's on Joe Biden. And they're going to make it worse. But I bring up the Alliance Defending Freedom early because the big story of this week in Washington is Nancy Pelosi is trying to spend not only your money and your kids' money, she's trying to spend your grandchildren's money and your great-grandchildren's money. $3.5 trillion. And she intimated she'd settle for $2.5 trillion or $2 trillion over there. We haven't got it. It's going to be the most inflationary, destructive expansion of the welfare state, destroying incentives to work, destroying family structures. She is on a rampage because she's a lame duck. She's out of here. And she wants a big going-away party with your money. She just wants a big, boy, didn't she get something big done. Same thing as Joe Biden. These legacy hunters are destroying our legacy to our kids by eating up. One thing they're doing is erasing stepped-up basis. So if you saved your whole life and you paid off your house, you happen to live in New York or California or Florida or someplace where houses appreciated, you did it the old-fashioned way. You paid off your student loans, you bought a house, you paid it off, it's appreciated in value, you've saved money in your 401k. Nancy Pelosi wants to take your money and end the long relied upon rule that when you die, your house goes to your kids and they can sell it tax-free. That rule's going away. It's called stepped-up basis. Same with a small business. They want to rewrite the tax codes of the United States in the dark in a committee that you have no idea about, run by an old acquaintance of mine, Jim McGovern, the most liberal, effective member of the House. He'll probably be the speaker, I think. He'll jump Hoyer, become the speaker. And that's unless Kevin McCarthy wins, and we should win. But that's the big story of the week. In the rundown this morning, first of all, changing recommendations for boosters lead to confusion for vaccinated and their doctors. You think? Fetching Mrs. Hewitt and I got boosted up on Friday. No side effects, just additional protection from COVID. I put a note of that on Twitter on Friday. Booster today, FMH2, 0 side effects, be smart. Get the third shot when you're eligible, stay healthy and happy, and CDC keep expanding eligibility. 1,100 people felt obliged to like that. 230 people felt obliged to comment on it. 111 people retweeted with or without comment. I'm astonished that that's newsy. I just thought it was kind of fun that I was eligible. The last time the vaccine came out, I was on the wrong side of 65. Now I'm 65, so I get the booster on the first day. And a bunch of people told me I was risking my life and part of a conspiracy. Look, you can be crazy all you want on the conspiracy stuff. The boosters are good science. My PhD toxicologist brother urged me to get it first day possible. I did. I urge you to go out and get it first day. If you've got an underlying condition, you're under 65, go in to see the pharmacist. Tell them I've got asthma and I want my booster, and they'll give it to you. It's a Pfizer booster. You can't get a Moderna booster yet because the FDA is still screwed up and the CDC screwed up. Go get boosted. Go get vaccinated. Sister-in-law lost another friend, went to another funeral this weekend from a perfectly healthy 60-year-old person who got COVID and died. The NBA's anti-vaxxers are a problem, by the way. Do you know this story? A very delicate story because it involves the highest paid athletes in America, and they're anti-vaxxers. Kyrie Irving, Mr. Flat Earth, who left Cleveland in an assured title. I'm not bitter, because LeBron was too big of a presence. He couldn't get his ink. He is leading the anti-vaxxer brigade among the NBAs. They're conspiracy-minded. And people are, the NBA is very popular, so people are delicately not criticizing Kyrie Irving and the other, let's just be frankly, they're not going to win the spelling bee, telling people not to get. You want to know why you have a problem in some segments of the sporting world where the NBA matters? Because their biggest stars are saying don't get vaccinated online. Crazy stuff. Okay, Congress heads into a tumultuous week, pressured by converging deadlines. For Schumer and Pelosi, that's the Post, for the New York Times. For Schumer and Pelosi, the challenge of a career with no margin for error. That's this week. How do we spend $3.5 trillion we don't have that doesn't belong to us? Democrats outside D.C. worry party will blow its chance of enacting historic agenda. A failure with political consequences. They're taking your money, your kids' money, your grandchildren's money. Call them up and tell them to stop. Threaten the Democrats that you will toss them out. The moderate, there are about 10 moderate Democrats. Kill this thing. Kristen Sinema and Joe Manchin are the thin line saving this country from wild inflation. Cargo piles up as California ports jostle over how to resolve delays. Democrats can't run ports. Thousand flee raging California fire, a new fire, the Fawn fire, as woman arrested with a lighter in her pocket. She is the physical and guilty equivalent of what Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer are going to do to inflation, put it on fire. I already told you Taliban hang body in public. Killers of Islamic State militants highlight power struggle within Afghanistan Taliban. They're sending assassins across the country. And the centrists in Germany, led by Merkel, lost yesterday, so Germany's going to go left. Not that it matters much to us. They're not really much of the defense of the West anymore. China is headed towards a major economic shakedown. The good news, Israeli Prime Minister Bennett praising the UAE and Bahrain in the UN during UN week. Don't go anywhere, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. That's the rundown.
Now. The most powerful organs of the state are not merely corrupt, but that they've been weaponized.
We are now all rooting for his success.
That's not what happened. It was a complete ambush.
I thought it's early enough. Let's just send a couple guys over.
And the audience was, ha, 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 ha. How funny to set up an innocent man.
This is what third world security states do. They spy on their political opponents like this.
This is part of a concerted Russian influence operation.
Russians, I'm not going to be specific as
He knew he could just say it on TV and then hide behind, well, it's all classified, I can't get into it.
It divided the country in ways that people can't imagine. It's inspired massive violence. It's given people who are bad faith actors a license to do whatever they want.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to Salem Now.
Trending now on The Charlie Kirk Show.
We now have what would only possibly be explained as a refugee camp somewhere out of Syria or Somalia in our own country in Del Rio, Texas. Now, Del Rio, Texas is right across the border from Mexico. Mexico has no desire or interest to actually secure the southern border on their side, unlike under President Trump, who actually negotiated a deal and threatened tariffs. And as soon as President Trump threatened a 5% tariff, Mexico came straight to the table and they started to try to secure the southern border. Now, we have manufactured mayhem right now in Del Rio, Texas, and the only reason we know anything about it is thanks to Fox News and one drone that flew.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Dennis Prager Show.
We meet the threat of challenging climate, the challenging climate we're all feeling, already ravaging every part of our world with extreme weather. Or will we suffer the merciless march of ever-worsening droughts and floods, more intense fires and hurricanes, longer heat waves, and rising seas?
It's something that I broadcast regularly. Bjorn Lomborg and others who actually report on the science, that a lot of what he just said isn't true, but it doesn't matter because the left believes it, the left owns the media, and so people believe it.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today.
This is Carol Platt-Liebau for townhall.com. It's not surprising that Joe Biden wants to turn the page on his incompetent withdrawal from Afghanistan and the abandonment of U.S. citizens and our allies there. Almost as unsurprising as the media's craven effort to help him. Even as Americans remain hostage in Afghanistan and the Taliban flaunts the military equipment we left them, the news has shifted to other domestic stories. It's inexplicable. Their silence is a scandal. But sadly, we've grown used to seeing the media try to influence public opinion in a way that benefits their chosen candidates. Let's hope that this time, Americans see through the manipulation. So long as America is being humiliated by a group of Taliban savages and our fellow citizens are captives, we deserve the full story. We should demand that the media give it to us. I'm Carol Platt-Liebau.
The Pepperdine Graduate School of Public Policy, for those considering careers in politics and policy.
Trending now on The Larry Elder Show.
All right, this from Just the News. Multiple public officials in Colorado are warning that the state's official COVID-19 death count is skewed due to the practice of conflating or confusing patients who have died directly from COVID-19, the disease, with those who have merely tested positive for it prior to the very next day. That murder-suicide case showed up on the state website as a COVID death.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com. Trending now on The Mike Gallagher.
Welcome back, America. Hugh Hewitt. Tuesday is Five for Fighting's second September song. John is really the September songwriter. He performed Superman at the concert for New York after 9/11. And last night he was talking on the stage about September concerts, how he always goes back to his playbook of 9/11 songs. And John also performed Blood on My Hands, and sadly noted, I think accurately, that that song will be more relevant in 6 months. It's relevant this morning. 4 Afghans hanging from cranes in the city of Herat as the Taliban announced they're back. Barbers forbidden. They're cruel. They're just cruel people. We did that. Meanwhile, an underground railroad continues to run. John's deeply involved with that, as is the Pineapple Express and all the other people who are working around the clock. No details can be given. They're working around the clock to get American citizens out because Tony Blinken's State Department's washed their hands. The military vets are still over there trying to move around. There's some American citizens there, thousands of green card holders, tens of thousands of SIV-eligible interpreters whom the Taliban are hunting. And John is on the road out there raising people's awareness of it. I'm going to go over and do a podcast interview with him later today, catch up with him, and we'll play that for you tomorrow. And then he's off to Annapolis tonight and then up to New York. Go to Five for Fighting and support them. Let me check on markets on Friday. It was a long travel day on Saturday, luckily crowned by an Ohio State victory over the Akron Zips, which are no easy team. And so the Ohio State Buckeyes in the defense of freedom rolled over them. Then the Cleveland Browns crushed the Chicago Bears. I can't use any other term. The Bears had a net 1 yard yesterday. Not that I'm rubbing it in. The Browns had 9 sacks. Myles Garrett had 4.5 sacks. OBJ is back. And they're still not at full strength because Jarvis Juice Landry is off on the sidelines for a couple more weeks. Eventually, they'll get their whole team. So they kind of focused on Nick Chubb yesterday, and Kareem Hunt went wild. I mean, the Browns are an awesome club. Now, this is pretty rare for me. I don't really remember 1964 when the Browns won the NFL championship. My dad and my brother went with Doc W. and his oldest son, Tommy. And the 4 of them went to the 64 championship game. And, of course, I got left at home. I was, 8. So did my older brother, so I couldn't really complain. But since that time, I've been waiting for a championship game and hadn't come along. This is the year. This is the year. Go Browns. Big day. Go Bucks. Big day. Watched it with my boys yesterday. One of them is home from deployment. The other one is here in town. We are that's the happiest spot. Watching the Browns win like that. Just terrific. Just terrific. So, got back to town. Markets on Friday. I wasn't paying much attention. I got boosted, and, people were talking to me about getting boosted. But the markets, this is brought to you by Birch Gold. All right, HughGold.com. That's where I buy my gold from, HughGold.com. Gold dropped below $17.50. So if your price place was $17.50, you go to text my name, Hugh, 474747, HUGH, 474747. They'll send you the information kit. Or go to Hugh Gold and get your gold, buy your gold, put your gold in your safety deposit box. Forget about it. Easiest way to transfer wealth among generations. And diversify. Wealth is made in concentration. It's preserved by diversification. Own stocks, own bonds, own real estate, own gold. Precious metals, and if you don't have the cash, roll over a portion of your IRA or 401k into a Birch Gold, monitored and cared for IRA. The 10-year Treasury jumped to 1.46. On Friday, the Dow was up. The S&P was up. The NASDAQ was off a little bit. Overseas this morning, everything is up as they're going to spend all the money in Germany, like the Democrats are planning on spending all of the money here in Washington, D.C. this week. I mean, all the money for decades ahead, because Joe Biden, Nancy Pelosi, and Chuck Schumer know it's your money, so why not spend it? I'll be right back on The Hugh Hewitt Show.
Portions of The Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you by Alliance Defending Freedom.
Trending now on The Mike Gallagher Show.
With the Vice President of the United States, the border czar, she's the one that Biden tasked with fixing the border. Wow, she's doing a heck of a job, isn't she? This is what she's upset about.
What I saw depicted about those individuals on horseback treating human beings the way they were is horrible. And I fully support what is happening right now, which is a thorough investigation into exactly what is going on there. But human beings should never be treated that way, and I'm deeply troubled about it. The whole point is that we have to understand Haiti. I mean, talk about a country that has just experienced so much tragedy that has been about natural disasters, and we really have to do a lot more to recognize that as a member of the Western Hemisphere, we've got to support some very basic needs that the people of Haiti have to get back up.
This is like right out of a comic book or a movie or a novel about an inept, comical, egregiously corrupt administration. You're going to investigate the Border Patrol agent on the horse? Why don't you, what are you still looking for the root cause of the problem, Kamala? Are you still looking for that? She's a little bit like O.J. Simpson looking for Nicole's killer on the golf courses of Las Vegas. He's still on that search, for the real killer of Nicole and Ron Goldman.
The Democratic Party somehow convinced black people that they're the good guys. Never mind the skanky history of the Democratic Party. That was a party of slavery. There is a whole big cottage industry for racism. If racism went away, a lot of people would be unemployed.
The mob during the Minneapolis riots following the death of George Floyd. A bunch of white thugs, frankly, burning down the city's traditional black and Asian business district.
They're racist, racist, racist. Everything's racist.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
There is one who's worse than all the rest, and that's Mayorkas, the Secretary of Homeland Security, because he came here as a Cuban refugee as a child, and he told the Cubans who want freedom in Cuba today to stay in that stinking communist hellhole as he keeps the southern border open wide. Do you agree? Is he perhaps the worst of the worst?
Oh, yeah, for a few reasons, not only what you just said, but he's a Secretary of Homeland Security. His job is secure the border, and he hasn't taken one action to slow the flow. Everything they've been working on is processing people quicker and releasing them quicker.
Yeah.
They haven't done a single thing to stop the flow.
Yeah.
And so he's ignored his oath of office. And I'll tell you, when he was Deputy Secretary, I worked for him. And we had a surge in FY15 under President Obama. We built thousands of family beds. We held people to see a judge. Most lost their cases, and we deported them.
So he knows what it takes.
He knows exactly the steps needed to stop this, and he's refusing to do any of it. So, he's no longer he's a Secretary of Homeland Insecurity because we're less secure now than we ever have been. And the man to stand on national TV every day and see this border say it's secure and it's closed, and the men and women of Green are looking at him as their boss saying, wait a minute. We're busting our butts down here. We're getting sick. This is unprecedented numbers. We got parts of the borders where there's nobody even patrolling. And you don't go on national TV and say we're not dealing with this? We're in some kind of nightmare where this crisis isn't really happening? It's an insult to the men and women who put their lives on the line every single day.
It's perfectly put. Alejandro Mayorkas is the Secretary of Homeland Insecurity.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe today at rumble.com. Trending now on The Charlie Kirk Show.
That there is a way that this could all be solved. That actually Republican states have the ability to solve this if they wanted to. Put Mayorkas aside, put the Biden bashing aside. I'm kind of tired of that, aren't you? I'm fatigued with governors going on cable television and saying, Biden regime is terrible and we need... Okay, enough of that, okay? Do something about it. And in fact, Texas showed that you can do something about it. If it gets so bad, it seemed as if local government stepped up and they secured the border. They created almost a perimeter around the Haitian criminal camp of border jumpers that have tried to come into our country. Now, some people in the media are saying, well, these are refugees. No, they are not. A refugee is someone who comes from a war-torn country that is facing imminent death, or their neighborhood or their home has been bombed. It is east of Cuba. Thousands of, I don't think thousands, probably 1,800 miles all the way to the eastern shore of Mexico, then to the border. Who's paying for this?
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today.
Welcome back, America. Hugh Hewitt. I play this whenever I get a note from Jan Genera, my buddy who runs the Wild Adventure, twa.us, and I got one on Friday. He said, "We are finishing up our last week of the season this Tuesday. Approximately 280 folks got some kind of a wild experience this year. Young guns to wild women to the Wild Adventure guys." And I have all these cards that people fill out a card when they hear about the show on the Hugh Hewitt Show, and they send me a postcard. And it's funny. Jan does this, and it's funny. This is in Montana. This is the best week of your life. This could be the best week of your life. And even if you've never held a fly fishing pole in your life, and especially if you are a fly fisherman, with 12 guys, you might pick them all. You might not know anybody. Doesn't matter. You have a great time. So here's some of the postcards I got. "Dear Hugh, the Wild Adventure made an impact in my life as a way to connect to others better and enrich our lives together, brought together by a book, Wild at Heart, and fly fishing. Steve from Sumterville, Florida." "Hey, Hugh, just finished. Great time reflecting, sharing with a fine group of men, interrupted by world-class trout fly fishing and catching. Thanks for your TWA plug, a real blessing." Then Dan chipped in. "Hugh, you weren't my source for TWA, but I want to share my profound thanks for you promoting TWA and the opportunity for men to share life in a real and meaningful way." Turns out about half the guys are sent by their wives grumbling. Their wives hear about TWA on this show, and then they sign them up for next summer, and then they go and they grumble until they get there, and they say, "This is the most beautiful place I've ever been," which it is. It's on the Madison River. It's just an extraordinary place. Dwayne's been. I've been a couple of times, 3. I'm a terrible fly fisherman. It's hard for you to believe, I know. It's hard for you to put that together. But the folks who go up there love it, and they've opened the registration for next summer. They will sell out by December. Head over to twa.us and hit register for a 2022 trip, and you will love it. I mean, you really will love it. Now I want to go to the interview that yesterday my friend Chuck Todd did with the Homeland Security Secretary Mayorkas. And I couldn't believe this. A very good interview by Chuck. And they're so dumbfounded by what is going on at the border. And I really think people are out calling for the resignation of Lloyd Austin because of the fiasco in Afghanistan and the now methodical assassination, murder of anyone who had anything to do with us. But at the meantime, about 12,000 Haitians have disappeared into the interior of the United States. They've admitted that. Let's just walk through this. First of all, Secretary Mayorkas refuses to call the border crisis a crisis. Cut number 4.
Of course I take responsibility. I'm president, but it was horrible what to see, as you saw. To see people treated like they did, horses barely running them over, people being strapped, it's outrageous. I promise you those people will pay. They will be, an investigation underway now, and there will be consequences. There will be consequences. It's an embarrassment, but it's beyond an embarrassment. It's dangerous. It's wrong. It sends the wrong message around the world. It sends the wrong message at home.
Now, that's Joe Biden talking about what he's worried about at the border. Here is Alexander Mayorkas, cut number 4, talking to Chuck Todd about what's going on down there.
Of course
I think we must have the wrong numbers assigned to this morning. So you can go to cut number 5 and see if that works. General Ben is having trouble with our server this morning. We're just looking for the Chuck Todd interview. So apparently, has it died on us? Is it just completely? Yeah, so they're completely bollocksed up. So he was adamant They would not talk about where the Haitians went. They wouldn't talk about whether the Haitians had been tested for COVID.
Do you accept the idea that we have a crisis at the border?
I am focused on mission, Chuck, and the challenges that we face and our ability to meet those challenges.
Now, whenever a journalist asks you a direct question, do we have a crisis on the border? And you don't answer the direct question, what's that tell you? We have a crisis on the border. Next clip, please.
Do we have enough resources down here to deal with the surge that's currently happening? Because we thought this was seasonal. Turned out it's not seasonal this year.
So we have an incredible ability to deploy resources to meet the challenges that we face. And
14,000 Haitians disappear. Cut number 6.
How many did your department test for COVID?
So we have strict COVID testing protocols that we apply across the board. We test, isolate, and quarantine unaccompanied children. We work with nonprofit organizations to test families. Those who are in ICE custody are tested, isolated, and quarantined. Those who are expelled under the Title 42 Public Health Authority are returned immediately. They are not placed in immigration court proceedings, and those we do not test because they are returned immediately.
But he asked about the Haitians who weren't returned immediately, and Mayorkas didn't answer again. I mean, this guy is good. He's really good. Now, he's gone from Chuck Todd over to Fox News, cut number 7.
Haven't you given them a reason to believe there's a reasonable chance if they come into this country, they'll end up being released into the country and have months or perhaps years to stay here?
Chris, this is nothing new. We've seen this type of irregular migration many, many times throughout the years. I don't know if Governor Abbott said the same thing in 2019 when there were more than 1 million people encountered at the southern border.
All right, stop. So it's gotten worse. He's denying it. He won't answer it. And then Chris confronts him with the 12,000 Haitians we expect to have been released. And it goes this way, cut number 8.
Chris, about 3,000 are actually in detention, and we make those detention determinations in the best interest of the American public. Others are in immigration court proceedings. They are monitored by us. We impose conditions upon them, so we keep in touch with them and ensure their appearance in court as the law requires.
But to answer my question directly, of the 17,400 that weren't deported back or didn't return on their own to Mexico, how many of them first, how many have been released into the U.S.?
They're released on conditions,
yes.
and approximately, I think it's about 10,000 or so, 12,000.
Have been released.
Yes. Stop. Did you hear that? 10,000 or so, 12,000. If you'd given him another minute, he'd gotten to 16,000. Honestly, there is no Department of Homeland Security. He is not a secretary of anything. It's a cipher. I don't know this guy. He will not answer questions because there is no policy. He gets asked by Chris Wallace about a wall and how that worked. He says this to him, cut number 9.
Why did you allow them in the country in the first place? Why didn't you build, forgive me, a wall or a fence to stop them from walking in this flood of people coming across the dam? It looks like a highway that allows them to cross the Rio Grande.
It is the policy of this administration. We do not agree with the building of the wall. The law provides that individuals can make a claim for humanitarian relief. That is actually one of our proudest traditions.
That is actually not true. It's not our proudest tradition. Humanitarian relief is our proudest tradition. Making a claim to overwhelm the asylum process is not one of our proudest traditions. It's one of our sucker punches. It's a kick me sign on the back of our Dwayne is whispering in my head, not stranding Americans abroad is our proudest tradition. That went out the door too. Last Secretary Mayorkas clip comes from State of the Union with Jake Tapper, cut number 10.
Can the Border Patrol count on you and President Biden, who has said the people will pay, to come to a determination based on the facts and not based on Twitter outrage?
They sure can. And let me say something about that, Jake. because I've worked very closely with the men and women of U.S. Customs and Border Protection for many years, many, many years. And they are heroic, what they do. And I saw their heroism displayed in Del Rio, Texas, last Monday when I was there on the ground.
And so forget what the president said, who's infirm anyway, as Ross Douthat wrote in the New York Times yesterday. They're not letting him out for a reason, friends. I think everyone knows the reason is that he really can't answer questions. So this fellow's in charge, and this fellow's letting everybody in. And this fellow then doesn't answer the questions about that. Ron DeSantis made a speech, governor of Florida, about the detention and release policy of the Biden administration, cut number 12.
We believe in secure borders in Florida, and that our country is sovereign and that the borders matter. We banned sanctuary cities in the state of Florida my first year in office. When we started to see the massive surge in Texas and Governor Abbott asked states to help, we were the first state to send people to help on the southern border. And we were proud of that mission.
Ron DeSantis leads every poll to be the nominee. Now, he'll have competition from Mike Pompeo and Tom Cotton and others, but it's going to be a deep bench to take over the incompetence gap. And then, of course, Nancy Pelosi on with George Stephanopoulos yesterday, friendly setting, friendly confines, and she still can't help herself, cut number 11.
Well, Chuck Schumer and I and Secretary Yellen the other day came forward in a press event and said that we had reached a framework of agreement. People said, well, what are the specific? Well, we'll see what we need. We'll see how the number comes down and what we need in that regard. But we have agreed on an array of pay-fors in the legislation. This will be paid for. So when some say, oh, well, what about inflation? It will be paid for. And that's the beauty of it, by having those in our economy and society who have not paid their fair share, paying their fair share. So again, the Senate and the House, those who are not in full agreement with the president's rate, let's see what our value, let's not talk about numbers and dollars, let's talk about values.
Let's not talk about numbers.
$3.5 trillion. Let's not talk about dollars.
Let's not talk about numbers. Can we put that on the eternal save board? Let's not talk about numbers, because the numbers will stun you. It's all your money. It's all your children's money. It's all your grandchildren's money. Call your Democrats. In Arizona, if you're listening to me early, call up Kristen Sinema, Joe Manchin, West Virginia, Maggie Hassan, New Hampshire. They're going to take all your money, raise all your taxes, and give it to people who have come into the country without permission, who are wandering around, released by the DHS. They're going to give it to people who don't want to work and haven't worked for a year, not because they are afraid of going back. They're just going to give it away. And it's a remarkable exercise in destroying a free market society. Time to get my relieffactor.com. We're going to have a long day today. Got a lot to do. Back inside the Beltway. Back inside the highways and byways of the Beltway in a beautiful fall. So I need my relief factor. I carry in curcumin, resveratrol, and omega. Take it every morning. In the first hour, and I feel great for it. And I'm completely injury-free from forever flying on Saturday and from jumping up and down as the Browns scored yesterday. You see, we have a habit of doing push-ups for every point. It was originally originated with the Naval Academy, but now the Ohio State Buckeyes do it as well, and basically Browns fans going to be a lot of push-ups this year. ReliefFactor.com. If you're doing that to get into shape, the Browns will get you in shape. Every time they score, you do as many push-ups as they have points on the board. So it's going to be a lot of push-ups this year. I'll tell you, Relief Factor will get you through it. $19.95 gets you started. Be an active senior, be an active young adult, be an active anything with ReliefFactor.com. America's columnist, Salena Zito, joins me next from Yinzerland, the Yinzer Report on The Hugh Hewitt Show.
Portions of The Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you in part by Bursch Gold Group.
Now.
The public would be outraged if they knew the truth.
Why do you think our politicians are not on the sidewalk right now talking to you?
Don't have no respect.
The old wall randomly turns into a guardrail, followed by miles of open border. Human trafficking.
That journey is extremely dangerous.
The 7-year-old girl died in the desert.
From the country of India.
A great pillar of the community was killed by a man who had been deported at least twice.
This little urn contains the ashes of my son. His dreams cut short forever.
We're so worried about other countries' problems, and we don't even focus on our own.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Trending now on the Dennis Prager Show.
Because if America's not the world's policeman, there are two things that will happen. Bad people will become the world's policemen, or there will be no policemen and they will be just mass evil. I fully plead guilty to the belief that America has a moral role to play in this world. And especially when it is at such little sacrifice as it was for the last couple of years in Afghanistan. We lost more people to the suicide bombing when Joe Biden said we would leave. In that day, we lost more servicemen than in the last year and a half, all put together. We're opening a new era of relentless diplomacy. Is there anybody who understands what that means? Relentless diplomacy with whom? With the Taliban? Yeah. That's actually one of those that he has in mind. Using the power of our development aid to invest in new ways of lifting people up around the world. I must admit that I didn't understand most of his speech. That is one of the sentences. I have no idea what he was talking about. Number 23.
Over the last 8 months, I prioritized rebuilding our alliances, revitalizing our partnerships, and recognizing they're essential and central to America's enduring security and prosperity. We have reaffirmed our sacred NATO alliance to Article 5 commitment.
How many people in that audience understood Article 5 commitment? But in any event...
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Mike Gallagher Show.
It's hard not to weep for our country right now, isn't it? When you see these images of thousands of people camped out under makeshift sticks and branches and trees, it does look like a third world nation.
Trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
Streaming.
Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Thank you for listening. Joined by America's columnist Salena Zito with the Yinzer Report out of Pittsburgh. Good morning, Salena. The Steelers lost again. Sorry, friend. It's going to be that way week after week after week.
I keep telling you I don't watch them.
I know. I wouldn't watch them either. My gosh. Ben belongs in a museum somewhere. Hey, look, I want to talk about... Well, you have two great columns this week. One on Adam Laxalt. We can talk about Adam's campaign often. You're right. He fuses the party. It's a national race. Nevada is everything. It's the 51st vote. But earlier in the week, probably 5 days ago, you wrote, Americans have not forgotten the 13 soldiers. What you mean, of course, your headline writer got it wrong. It's 11 Marines, 1 Navy corpsman, 1 soldier killed in the Afghanistan suicide bombing. Last night, John Andrazik at 5 for Fighting concert talked about them repeatedly, played Blood on My Hands, also played a couple of soldier songs, All for One. Really, Americans have not forgotten any of those who have died or been wounded in this war, but the national news media has.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, what's really stunning is immediately when this happened, you started seeing these table settings, right, at bars, at pubs, at restaurants, where there would be a table set for this 13 men and women who lost their lives in Afghanistan. And then you would see the 13 beers. And then you would see in like white tablecloth restaurants, 13 glasses of wine. And it went even further, and it hasn't stopped. I see it around where I live, where people will have 13 chairs in their yard with 13 flags setting beside it. And people are showing it in all kinds of different ways, and it hasn't gone away. And what I think the national media is missing, and what this administration is missing, is this moment has left an imprint on the American psyche. People have really sort of paused and thought about Afghanistan and thought about how we left and have not let go of that. And I think the important distinction is it's not because they didn't want people to leave or they wanted the war to still go on. It's not about that at all. It's about how we've left. The argument isn't and the disappointment and the sadness and the sort of imprint in their brain is about how we left, and it's not going away.
Now, for 7 months, from his inauguration until August 30th, Joe Biden was in complete control of a process that could have brought out tens of thousands of SIV eligible. He could have brought out every single endangered LPR American citizen. Instead, he settled on an arbitrary date driven by a political deadline, and he forced our people into a panicked withdrawal over the objections of his generals. Now, it is unfortunate that Secretary Austin did not say anything publicly when he declared an extraordinary victory, but the 13 lost lives is symbolic of a lost mission, not one without value. For 20 years, they had freedom. For 20 years, women were educated. For 20 years, some got out. Not without value, but ultimately a failure because of Joe Biden's exit.
Yes, absolutely. And there are still American citizens, SIV holders, green card holders that are over there. And the heroic efforts of the people trying to get them out, private citizens, most of them are veterans, well-pocketed veterans who are funding this, that are getting people out, and it's just a remarkable moment in our history that I think that while the press is not doing a great job chronicling it, the American people have not forgotten it.
Now, last night, in fact, at the Five for Fighting concert in Alexandria, Virginia, at the Bursch, John Androzek talked about the fact that an underground railroad is now running. Unfortunately, they lose as many as they get out. A number of missions, the Taliban finds people and they execute them in the houses. So the Underground Railroad that is operating through the skeletal remains of an NGO system and American vets and moneyed people is getting people out. And it's very difficult to cover. You can't cover because you don't want to endanger anyone, but it's going on, Salena.
Yes, absolutely. I have been in contact with people, and you're right. You can't cover it in the way in the way that you should or should be able to. But if you do, people die. People get hurt.
But the one thing that comes through, the United States Department of State is not helping. They've just washed their hands of it. It's not a Pentagon mission anymore. It's a State Department mission, and they're just incompetent to do it. They don't want to do it. Tony Blinken has said, turn your back. Let's get back to climate change. Wendy Sherman is over begging the Iranians for a deal. John Kerry's trotting around the world. And they cannot be bothered with American citizens and LPRs at risk of death and execution in Afghanistan. It's shameful.
It is absolutely shameful. And they are not only not doing anything, they are serving as a roadblock in many instances in a way that is incredibly shameful.
The stories will come out. Salena knows them. I know them. John Androzek knows them. People in the Pineapple Express know them. We're not talking about them, but we will eventually tell you about them. And it's not, well, Joe Biden's simply not there. Just checked out. We don't ever check out. Salena Zito always checks in on Monday. Thank you, Salena. Go to salenazito.com for her wonderful story, Americans Have Not Forgotten the 13 Military. And I'll be right back on The Hugh Hewitt Show.
The most powerful organs of the state are not merely corrupt, but that they've been weaponized to go after perceived domestic enemies. And that's very scary.
Our constitutional democracy enshrines the peaceful transfer of power.
We are now all rooting for his success. The peaceful transition of power is one of the hallmarks of our democracy.
We don't live in the United States of America as any of us would like to understand it.
We have a peaceful transition of power process. That's not what happened.
They interviewed General Flynn, and they did it in what was a complete ambush.
I thought it's early enough. Let's just send a couple guys over.
And the audience was, ha, 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 ha. How funny to set up an innocent man.
This is what third world security states do. They spy on their political opponents like this.
This is part of a concerted Russian influence operation.
Russian interference.
They colluded. They were in on it.
He would constantly say, I have seen evidence of collusion.
Until this is released, I can't comment.
I can't go into the particulars.
Russians, I'm not going to be specific as...
He knew he could just say it on TV and then hide behind, well, it's all classified, I can't get into it.
Well, it's classified. You can't see it. Collusion. You just got to be willing to see it.
New York's Daily News ran this front page, Trump is Hitler.
How could 62 million Americans vote for Hitler? Are 62 million Americans Nazis?
We really almost thought it was a joke. Like, really, you're not going to accept that you lost this election?
Then they see the Russia collusion narrative sitting right there in front of them and say, why don't we just say that he cheated?
It divided the country in ways that people can't imagine. It's inspired massive violence. It's given people who are bad faith actors a license to do whatever they want because they literally feel like they're fighting Russian spies and Nazis.
Russiagate has been the most egregious abuse of everything that was supposed to have been good about our government.
The thing that they were investigating the Trump campaign for is what they themselves were doing.
Streaming on Salem Now.
¿Cuánto queda?
No queda nada. Que lo siento mucho.
And that's the only time you can come to Christ. When the Spirit of God calls you to the call, don't you hesitate.
Have you ever thought of going to seminary?
Madre, padre, ¿quién está listo para ser transformado por el poder de su palabra?
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
I grew up with hope, which is even worse than being poor.
We would have sandwiches with no meat.
My American dream entailed working hard and making $20,000 a year. But I surpassed that goal and became a corporate CEO.
We'll all be able to say, free at last, free at last.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com. Streaming on Salem Now.
The public would be outraged if they knew the truth.
Why do you think our politicians are not on the sidewalk right now talking to you?
Don't have no respect.
The old wall randomly turns into a guardrail, followed by miles of open border.
Human trafficking bar.
That journey is extremely dangerous.
The 7-year-old girl died in the desert.
From the country of India.
A great pillar of the community was killed by a man who had been deported at least twice.
This little urn contains the ashes of my son. His dreams cut short forever.
We're so worried about other countries' problems, and we don't even focus on our own.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to Salem Now.
Tesla was a genius. His most amazing discoveries thought to be written in a lost journal. Now, in the right hands, it could revolutionize the 21st century.
You can stop an earthquake. Doesn't that mean you could start one too?
That's why that notebook should never fall into the wrong hands.
Shall we stop this thing?
Save the universe.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
This family can pick you up every time you fall.
Every time I take one step forward.
When Wright came in this morning, he wants to fight you.
No one expected this out of him.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com. Salem Now.
The most powerful organs of the state are not merely corrupt, but that they've been weaponized.
We are now all rooting for his success.
That's not what happened.
It was a complete ambush.
I thought it's early enough. Let's just send a couple guys over.
And the audience was, ha, 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 ha. How funny to set up an innocent man.
This is what third world security states do. They spy on their political opponents like this.
This is part of a concerted Russian influence operation.
Russians, I'm not going to be specific as he knew he could just say it on TV and then hide behind, well, it's all classified, I can't get into it.
It divided the country in ways that people can't imagine. It's inspired massive violence. It's given people who are bad faith actors a license to do whatever they want.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to Salem Now.
Trending now on The Charlie Kirk Show.
We now have what would only possibly be explained as a refugee camp somewhere out of Syria or Somalia in our own country in Del Rio, Texas. Now, Del Rio, Texas is right across the border from Mexico. Mexico has no desire or interest to actually secure the southern border on their side, unlike under President Trump, who actually negotiated a deal and threatened tariffs. And as soon as President Trump threatened a 5% tariff, Mexico came straight to the table and they started to try to secure the southern border. Now, we have manufactured mayhem right now in Del Rio, Texas, and the only reason we know anything about it is thanks to Fox News and one drone that flew.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now.
Well, Chuck Schumer and I and Secretary Yellen the other day came forward in a press event and said that we had reached a framework of agreement. People said, well, what are the specific? Well, we'll see what we need. We'll see how the number comes down and what we need in that regard. But we have agreed on an array of pay-fors in the legislation. This will be paid for. So when some say, oh, well, what about inflation? It will be paid for. And that's the beauty of it, by having those in our economy and society who have not paid their fair share, paying their fair share. So again, the Senate and the House, those who are not in full agreement with the president's rate, let's see what our value, let's not talk about numbers and dollars, let's talk about values.
Morning, glory, America. Let's not talk about numbers. Let's talk about values because, boy, it's going to be quite the debate. Jake Sherman joins me, Hugh Hewitt, inside the Beltway. Punchbowl News reporting on the intricacies of the dilemma facing Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer. How much of other people's money to spend and who to give it to. Good morning, Jake. How are you?
Good morning, Hugh. How are you?
Good. How about that line? Let's not talk about dollars. Let's talk about values. That's a great way to avoid talking about the problems in her caucus.
Well, you know, I'll say this in defense of her. I'm not defending her, but just to actually let me provide some context. We know the ceiling here, which is $3.5 trillion. What she's saying is, let's have a discussion. I'm not defending her, just trying to put some context around this. She's saying let's have a discussion on the policies, and then we'll see in what window that will fall. Fair enough. But I mean, listen, I think the problem is that Pelosi's not in the driver's seat here completely. She's in the driver's seat to a large degree, but in the co-pilot seat is Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema and the Democratic moderates, the House Democratic moderates, who are not agreeing to a $3.5 trillion bill. So you need to talk about the top line because the top line is what matters to some people. You know, and she says it's all paid for. Yes, it is paid for by tax increases on a whole host of individuals and things of that nature. But she can't decide individually to not talk about the numbers. That's something that all Democrats have to agree on. I mean, they don't even have to agree on it, but they need a top-line number. People are curious what that's going to be because, Hugh, as you know, people are going to go home and campaign in 2022. Republicans are, and they're going to say they spent $3.5 trillion or they spent $2.5, whatever it ends up being. So people are curious, rightfully so, what that number will be.
Yeah, they've already spent $2 trillion this year. So let's make sure our baseline is already $2 trillion under Joe Biden. President Obama's much vaunted super stimulus after the 2008 financial collapse was $850 billion. So the multiple that we will get, whether it's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, will stun and destroy the Democratic Party in 2022. That's my prediction based upon off years for many, many years, and that's why they're shy about this, Democratic moderates. I am curious, Jake, this gets into the interstices of the deal. The New York Times has reported Senator Sinema has told her caucus no corporate or personal income tax hikes. I believe that leaves her open to increasing or eliminating stepped-up bases or minimizing stepped-up bases. Stepped-up basis is actually the ticking time bomb for the Democrats, as it will destroy their hold in Orange County, California, in New York City, in Florida, anywhere where home prices appreciated, Virginia, Maryland, wherever home prices appreciated. If they do away with or limit step basis, they're going to lose voters. What do you understand about the approach to stepped-up basis? The House ruled it out, and apparently Ron Wyden is in love with it.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be in. I don't, and I also don't agree with the New York Times reporting there.
Interesting. Tell me.
We heard that a couple weeks ago. I don't know who we heard it from, nor would I say, but I don't think it was somebody with a motivation. And we went to them, to Sinema's people, and they said, no, that's not her position. That's never been her position. So let's just level set here. If that is true, that is a massive story, not something that, is mentioned offhand. That's a massive story. And it would also doom this bill. You cannot spend $3 trillion paid for without raising taxes. It's just, you can't do it.
Even if they raise all the taxes, they won't pay for it. The original budget resolution allowed for $1.5 trillion spending in excess of tax increases. So
Agreed.
Their ceiling is whatever the revenue that comes in from tax increases plus $1.5 trillion is their top line ceiling.
Correct. And also you mentioned the bank bailout or the stimulus. I think you were talking about the stimulus, but
yes.
I mean, a lot of that was much maligned, politically tough. And, the thing I keep coming back to, Hugh, is the bank bailouts, which were mostly paid back at the end of the day by the banks, by the institutions once they got healthy. That was a lot of money, but it was all paid back. So that just gives the magnitude of what this legislation is. I don't believe that from Sinema. I don't believe that's the case. I don't believe stepped-up basis will be in the bill. I think that's going to – I mean, if you look at someone like Josh Gottheimer, who represents the wealthy suburbs of New Jersey, what is he going to do? Get rid of the state and local tax deduction on one end and then get rid of and then do stepped up basis, which is going to. I think it was left out of the House for a reason. I don't think it's going to pass. I don't think it's time to add things back in. And if you listen carefully, the menu of revenue raisers that they've chosen, according to Pelosi and Schumer, are things that the House and Senate agree on, and they don't agree on stepped up basis.
You know, I've got a sponsor, Jake, the Job Creators Network, and this has been the greatest gift to the Job Creators Network. They're on a bus tour, jcnbustour.com, because small businesses across the United States are signing up for, I think it's now the new Federation of Small Businesses, and jcnbustour.com if people want to go to it. They're signing up small businesses everywhere because stepped up basis also targets any car wash, any restaurant, any family store or business that descends to the children, not only houses and not only second homes, but businesses. And Tom Cotton tells me small lumber people in Arkansas, they dominated an entire meeting about this. Democrats really don't know when they step on tax landmines. I think they're almost oblivious to it. You mentioned one member who gets it. How many members get it, what they're about to do to their political futures?
I think if they do that, I think they I just don't think it's going to happen. But they do say that, and I think this is true. I mean, you're hearing a lot of Republicans talk about the spending side instead of the tax side, because Republicans believe, I mean, they say it, that corporate tax increases and individual tax increases, the marginal rate increase on the high end, is actually pretty popular. And they don't think it's a winning argument at this point. It could turn into a winning argument, but they think the spending is the winning argument, the out of control in their estimation. I'm quoting them, I'm not saying it myself, the out of control spending. That's what they say.
Well, I agree with them. I think a 39.5% top rate is eminently reasonable. People can disagree. You want to raise the business capital gains, the corporate tax to 25%. I don't think it's smart, but it's not the end of the world. The end of the world is an inflationary cycle kicked off by another $1.5 trillion unpaid for dollars. So I really think it's the unpaid for $1.5 trillion that is the problem here. And Nancy Pelosi is simply not telling the truth. I won't say lying because that requires mens rea. But she's not telling the truth, Jake, when she says, let's not talk, everything will be paid for. Catherine Rampell, my colleague at the Washington Post, said that on MSNBC, everything will be paid for. It's absurd. Of course it's not paid for, is it?
Well, it's not completely paid for. Listen, let me take that back. It's not. It depends how you calculate it. It really depends how you look at it and how you calculate it. The offsets for the tax-raising offsets don't completely match the spending. So, I mean, that's an objective point of view.
Yes, not by $1.5 trillion. That's what the budget resolution said. Jake, I got a quick technical. Go ahead.
I just want to say we don't know what the spending level is going to be yet. It could be just $1 trillion. I mean, it could be $1.5 trillion. We don't know. We just don't know.
The max it can be. You're right. The maximum it can be is $1.5 trillion deficit. Will they get any Republican vote for the CR, whether or not they put Iron Dome into it? I don't think so. Will they get any Republican vote for the debt ceiling? I don't think so. Will they have to amend the budget resolution? I think so. But what does Jake Sherman and Punchbowl News think?
They will get Republican votes for the CR. They absolutely will. I think it'll pass overwhelmingly.
A clean CR. A clean CR.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah. But not one with the debt limit.
They will not get any votes for the debt limit, I don't think, as a standalone. And yes, I think they're going to have to amend the budget resolution, and they need to get on that because there's no other way at this point, unless they're going to do something that we don't understand at this point.
And so they really have flubbed the summer. And now the Afghanistan collapse did obscure everything, but they flubbed their time in the summer to hammer this out. So now they're going to rush through it in a week, Jake?
Yeah, this is what we said in Punchbowl News this morning is this would be a big legislative agenda for a year, and they're going to try to do it in a week. I don't think they're going to get it done this week. Neither do most of the negotiators, most of the people involved, and people in the leadership. They'll get CR done this week, and they'll get infrastructure done this week. I don't think they'll get reconciliation done.
Jake Sherman always has his finger on the pulse. You should be getting punchbowlnews.com every morning. It's free. Be smart. Go sign up for it, punchbowlnews.com. I'll be right back. Thank you, Jake, on The Hugh Hewitt Show.
Portions of The Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you in part by Job Creators Network.
Trending now on the Dennis Prager Show.
We meet the threat of challenging climate the challenging climate we're all feeling, already ravaging every part of our world with extreme weather? Or will we suffer the merciless march of ever-worsening droughts and floods, more intense fires and hurricanes, longer heat waves, and rising seas?
It's something that I broadcast regularly. Bjorn Lomborg and others who actually report on the science, that a lot of what he just said isn't true, but it doesn't matter because the left believes it. The left owns the media, and so people believe it.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today.
This is Carol Platt-Liebau for townhall.com. It's not surprising that Joe Biden wants to turn the page on his incompetent withdrawal from Afghanistan and the abandonment of U.S. citizens and our allies there. Almost as unsurprising as the media's craven effort to help him. Even as Americans remain hostage in Afghanistan and the Taliban flaunts the military equipment we left them, the news has shifted to other domestic stories.
Hugh Hewitt, fortunate son by Creedence Clearwater.
It's inexplicable. Their silence is a scandal. But sadly, we've grown used to seeing the media try to influence public opinion in a way that benefits their chosen candidates. Let's hope that this time, Americans see through the manipulation. So long as America is being humiliated by a group of Taliban savages and our fellow citizens or captives, we deserve the full story. We should demand that the media give it to us. I'm Carol Platt-Liebau.
The Pepperdine Graduate School of Public Policy, for those considering careers in politics and policy. Trending now on The Larry Elder Show.
All right, this from Just the News. Multiple public officials in Colorado are warning that the state's official COVID-19 death count is skewed due to the practice of conflating or confusing patients who have died directly from COVID-19, the disease, with those who have merely tested positive for it prior to the death. So you guys got me here. There's a differentiation here. There are people that are actually dying from COVID itself. Okay? Got it. And then there's people that may be dying of some other condition, but they may have tested positive for COVID. Perhaps they were even asymptomatic. Nonetheless, these people are getting registered as COVID-19 deaths when it isn't COVID that caused it. Now, I will say this as a caveat. There are some people that have some conditions, and COVID can worsen those conditions, and maybe make their demise come on more quickly. So we do have to be fair in that instance. But as health officials have failed to make those key distinction points in when it comes to the government's tally of COVID deaths. This is from Brenda Brock. Brenda Brock is the coroner for Grand County, Colorado. And she told Cheryl Atkinson that in November, listen to this. And this isn't a one-off. She told Cheryl Atkinson that back in November, she processed a murder-suicide case. The very next day, that murder-suicide case showed up on the state website as a COVID death.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
Somehow it's convinced black people that they're the good guys. Never mind the skanky history of the Democratic Party. That was a party of slavery. There is a whole big cottage industry for racism. If racism went away, a lot of people would be unemployed.
The mob during the Minneapolis riots following the death of George Floyd. A bunch of white thugs, frankly, burning down the city's traditional black and Asian business district.
They're racist. Everything's racist.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Trending now on America First.
Welcome back, America. Hugh Hewitt inside the Beltway. Went with a bunch of friends last night to hear Five for Fighting at the Bursch, one of the preeminent live music venues. As music reopens across the United States, John was great, John Andrazik. I'm going to catch him up later today, tape an interview about Blood on My Hands. The Underground Railroad that is running out of Afghanistan now. The Taliban hanged 4 people overnight from cranes in the city of Herat, even as they issued an edict against cutting beards in Kabul and threatened severe punishment. It's the return of the medievalism that we saw 20 years ago. They keep saying they're not going to have the Al-Qaeda network, but the Haqqani network is Al-Qaeda, and they're the interior minister. It is a matter of time till we have to go back. In the meantime, we have to get as many of the American citizens and green card holders, LPRs, and the interpreters and their families and those who worked at the embassy out. Private groups are working to get them out. John mentioned in passing he's working with them every day. This is not political. This is a shame on every American except those who fought there to bring them freedom. They're the only ones who are not complicit in this. The families of the fallen want nothing to do with Joe Biden. The president's numbers are at 44% and falling as the Democrats scramble to try and buy some love back after this debacle, after this shame, and it's not working. Meanwhile, they can't keep people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez off of the air. She sat down with Margaret Hoover on sort of the reboot of PBS's Firing Line. I like the show. I don't think it gets much support from PBS, unfortunately. Margaret's pretty smart. And AOC decided to sit down with Margaret. It did not go well as they talked about the Israeli-Palestinian issue, and AOC demonstrated once again she really is never going to win the spelling bee. Cut number 14.
But I am, of course, the dynamic there in terms of geopolitics and the war in the Middle East is very different than people expressing their First Amendment right to protest.
Well, yes, but I also think that what people are starting to see, at least in the occupation of Palestine, is just an increasing crisis of humanitarian condition. And that to me is just where I tend to come from on this issue.
You use the term the occupation of Palestine. What did you mean by that?
I think what I meant is like the settlements that are increasing in some of these areas and places where Palestinians are experiencing difficulty in access to their housing and homes.
Do you think you can expand on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'd also I am not the expert on geopolitics on this issue.
That is an understatement. Margaret Hoover did the right thing. When confronted with someone who uses buzzwords, ask them what the buzzwords mean. Because when AOC, I've noticed this, every AOC interview is the same. She has in her mind a slogan that she wants to put out there. She puts the slogan out and moves on. And the slogan means whatever it means to whomever wants to see it. It's always the problem with bumper stickers, slogans, and gestures is that people invest in it what they want to. Rarely does someone, as Margaret Hoover did, hats off to Margaret, say, what do you mean by that, the occupation of Palestine? Then there's another word cloud in her head, settlements. And she says, settlements. And you begin to understand that the people who are spending your money, your children's money, your grandchildren's money, your great-grandchildren's money, more money than has been spent in red ink since World War II, this week and next, don't have any idea what they're doing. They're the same people who are, quote, running the border by not running the border. They're the same people that destroyed Afghanistan in a fortnight of running away. This is the most incompetent. Trump made you upset. He got stuff done. This is the most incompetent administration of my lifetime. Just pure incompetence because it's led by an infirm president who doesn't really know what's going on. I'll be right back, America. Stay tuned.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you in part by Simon & Schuster's Enemy at the Gates, the latest in the Vince Flynn series by Kyle Mills.
Trending now on The Mike Gallagher Show.
with the Vice President of the United States, the border czar. She's the one that Biden tasked with fixing the border. Wow, she's doing a heck of a job, isn't she? This is what she's upset about.
What I saw depicted about those individuals on horseback treating human beings the way they were is horrible. And I fully support what is happening right now, which is a thorough investigation into exactly what is going on there. But human beings should never be treated that way, and I'm deeply troubled about it. The whole point is that we have to understand Haiti. I mean, talk about a country that has just experienced so much tragedy that has been about natural disasters, and we really have to do a lot more to recognize that as a member of the Western Hemisphere, we've got to support some very basic needs that the people of Haiti have to get back up.
This is like right out of a comic book or a movie or a novel about an inept, comical, egregiously corrupt administration. You're going to investigate the Border Patrol agent on the horse? What are you still looking for the root cause of the problem, Kamala? Are you still looking for that? She's a little bit like O.J. Simpson looking for Nicole's killer on the golf courses of Las Vegas. He's still on that search, for the real killer of Nicole and Ron Goldman.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
The Democratic Party somehow has convinced black people that they're the good guys. Never mind the skanky history of the Democratic Party. That was a party of slavery. There is a whole big cottage industry for racism. If racism went away, a lot of people would be unemployed.
The mob during the Minneapolis riots following the death of George Floyd. A bunch of white thugs, frankly, burning down the city's traditional black and Asian business district.
They're racist, racist, racist. Everything's racist.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
There is one who's worse than all the rest, and that's Mayorkas, the Secretary of Homeland Security, because he came here as a Cuban refugee as a child, and he told the Cubans who want freedom in Cuba today to stay in that stinking communist hellhole as he keeps the southern border open wide. Do you agree? Is he perhaps the worst of the worst?
Oh, yeah, for a few reasons, not only what you just said, but he's a Secretary of Homeland Security. His job is to secure the border, and he hasn't taken one action to slow the flow. Everything they've been working on is processing people quicker and releasing them quicker.
Yeah.
They haven't done a single thing to stop the flow.
Yeah.
And so he's ignored his oath of office. And I'll tell you, when he was Deputy Secretary, I worked for him. And we had a surge in FY15 under President Obama. We built thousands of family beds. We held people to see a judge. Most lost their cases, and we deported them.
So he knows what it takes.
He knows exactly the steps needed to stop this, and he's refusing to do any of it. So, he's no longer he's a Secretary of Homeland Insecurity because we're less secure now than we ever have been. And the man to stand on national TV every day and see this border say it's secure and it's closed, and the men and women of green are looking at him as their boss saying, wait a minute. We're busting our butts down here. We're getting sick. This is unprecedented numbers. We got parts of the borders where there's nobody even patrolling. And you don't go on national TV and say we're not dealing with this? We're in some kind of nightmare where this crisis isn't really happening? It's an insult to the men and women who put their lives on the line every single day.
It's perfectly put. Alejandro Mayorkas is the Secretary of Homeland Insecurity.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe today at rumble.com. Trending now on the Dennis Prager Show.
The public would be outraged if they knew the truth.
Why do you think our politicians are not on the sidewalk right now talking to you?
No have no respect.
The old wall randomly turns into a guardrail, followed by miles of open border.
Human trafficking gone. That journey is extremely dangerous.
The 7-year-old girl died in the desert.
From the country of India.
A great pillar of the community was killed by a man who had been deported at least twice.
This little urn contains the ashes of my son. His dreams cut short forever.
We're so worried about other countries' problems, and we don't even focus on our own.
Look for Salem now in the App Store.
Are not merely corrupt, but that they've been weaponized.
We are now all rooting for his success.
That's not what happened. It was a complete ambush.
I thought it's early enough. Let's just send a couple guys over.
And the audience was, ha, 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 ha. How funny to set up an innocent man.
It divided the country in ways that people can't imagine. It's inspired massive violence.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to Salem Now.
Back, American Hugh Hewitt, Fortunate Son by Creedence Clearwater Revival. If you heard my first interview with Kyle Mills, who has written this brand new Vince Flynn book, Enemy at the Gates, you will know that Fortunate Son by CCNR is in the book. And in the first interview I brought up, I'm not going to go back over that. I want to talk about the dark vision of Enemy at the Gates, Kyle. There are two dark visions in this book. One is the dark vision of the trillionaire class that is coming, and the second is the dark vision of American politics. Well, let's start with the latter. I'm not going to say who is corrupt and who's terrible. I'm not giving anything away. Does Kyle Mill believe it's that bad?
Yeah, I think so. It makes me sad to say that, but he just watched the news and it seems a little bit disastrous on all sides. I think we've lost our ability to solve problems and to discuss problems, and everything's just sort of become a lot of partisan shouting. So that's not a great place to be. And going back again to my time in Africa, it feels very much like that, where you've got sort of tribal warfare going on and everybody's just trying to get on top of the other tribe.
You know what I've told people, though, for years? I said a Reagan will emerge. And by that, I mean a serious person. They don't have to be academic. They don't have to be nuclear, but a serious person who will be well-versed in everything. They will emerge. And they'll be very smart. You know, I point at Republican candidates like Pompeo and Cotton and DeSantis and Tim Scott, and there are others who are very, very smart people and very, very serious people. But your premise seems to be the smart ones are the ones we have to worry about.
Well, it can be. I mean, why do you get into politics now? It seems like a very difficult and sort of soul-crushing business. And it makes me... I'm a little concerned that the American people have created an environment which only people who are pretty twisted would want to get into it. And
I 100% agree. I wouldn't go near it. Not in a million years. For reasons that you talk about. I've stayed away from it for years for the reasons you talk about. It used to be fairly, it was patty cake. Let me talk to you a little bit about the other dark side of this, which is the ability of wealth to do whatever it wants, and the creation not of a billionaire's class, but of a trillionaire's class. Now, we're not there yet. Jeff Bezos isn't even a quarter of the way to trillionaire class. And I don't know if you were talking about Bezos here. It sounded to me like you were talking about Peter Thiel, and I know Peter. And I've spent time with him, and I've had dinner with him, and I've had dinner with Zuckerberg, and I know these guys. I think you were talking about Thiel, were you? Is that Nicholas Ward?
No, I didn't have anybody specific in mind. It's more of a composite of a number of very wealthy people. You think about the technology and that's one set of people, and medical is another set of people. So I just wanted to create somebody that wouldn't be too identifiable.
Okay, well, I immediately thought, because Nicholas Ward is a very interesting character. I'm not going to tell anyone what happens to Nicholas Ward. It's just a very interesting character, very smart character, motivated by unlimited wealth. And unlimited wealth truly is an astonishing concept, which you drive home in Enemy at the Gates. You really can't afford to do anything when you've got $50 billion, and this guy's a trillionaire. You don't really care, right? They call up as many special operators as they need. They ask what the price is, and they fly.
Sure, yeah. It's at some point, it just becomes play money. It doesn't really make any difference. It's just a number on a computer. So yeah, absolutely.
Have you met any of the billionaires and seen their security details?
Yeah, I knew one, and it was. It was much more beyond what I expected.
They are very serious about security for reasons that you have now pointed out. That I think Enemy at the Gates is going to have a lot of readers in the billionaire class, and they're all of a sudden going to turn around and they're going to beef up their security, and they're going to turn to certain professionals to do that, because what you also bring through the darkness here is that these people are disintermediating established industries. Whether it is the pharmaceutical industry, whether it is the energy industry, whether it is the automobile industry or the artificial intelligence, vast amount of wealth is threatened with a disintermediation that will be far more rapid than ever has been thought of before. Again, I think it's just amazing you put this into Enemy at the Gates. How long have you been thinking about that?
Oh, I think a long time. And, this was kind of I've been wanting to write a book similar to this. In the beginning, it was much more about kind of a slow fall of American democracy. And I decided that was kind of cutting a little close to what was going on at the time when I was writing it. So I changed it a little bit to this. But I think what you see is definitely an international ruling class rising up again, and kind of going back to feudal times. And I think the idea that that's going to become very entrenched and is going to cross borders, I think that more and more that's what's happening. When
we're taping this, it comes the day after the Met Gala. And the Met Gala is where all of New York's formerly important people go. They're no longer important because they're not actually living at this level. Davos isn't at this level. I actually don't think the people you're writing about who are Nicholas Ward people, they don't bother with Davos. They got their own club. Am I right about that?
Oh, yeah. I mean, absolutely. I think so. I mean, there's some point where you become above the law. And, it's not, you don't have to be a trillionaire. I think $1 billion will get you there. I mean, I see it. I live in strangely, I moved to a ski town 30 years ago, and now I live it's become the wealthiest county in America. And, you see it all the time. It's a very different lifestyle and very different set of concerns and things like that.
And that is the darkest part of Enemy at the Gates, which is a great thriller, and people will not put it down like I couldn't put it down when I read it. The darkest part is wealth puts you above the law. And all of the restraints that we have on the National Security Agency, the Central Intelligence Agency, the Defense Intelligence Agency, all of our black operations, all of our Fourth Amendment-based search and seizure rules, they do not apply to private companies. So if you can develop a sinister surveillance system in the private sector, you can almost certainly deploy it. Do you believe that, Kyle? Because that's what I came away from Enemy at the Gates thinking you believe.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's absolutely true. So, I mean, and you could get in trouble for it, but again, it's a little hard to prosecute a billionaire.
It's almost impossible. Okay, last question.
So,
if you take all the technology from the super sniper gun at the very beginning, and the super sniper gun, 3,000 yards. I don't know what that means. I don't shoot guns. It sounds like it's a long way away. So you can be walking down the street and fall over dead and not even hear the shot, right? Okay, that's super sniper technology.
Oh, yeah.
Or flashbangs that are actually stun guns. There's a lot of fun technology in here that there always is in a thriller. But then you apply the reality of what you learned to the Chinese Communist Party and what they are doing with technology. 1984 is here, Kyle Mills. There's no doubt in my mind it's already here.
It'll be interesting to see where it goes. Especially with somewhere like China, because China is becoming very much a personality cult around. I mean, China exists for one man more and more. So it'll be interesting to see what he does to accumulate more and more power. But that's what it's about, to no necessary end. So again, it's an interesting time to be a thriller writer, because this isn't the Soviet Union versus the United States or Islam against the United States. It's coming at us from a lot of different directions.
That's the enemy at the gates is actually many enemies at many gates, and some of them are internal, some of them are far removed. But Kyle Mills, this is a heck of a book. Congratulations on Vince Flynn, Enemy at the Gates, in bookstores now. When's the next one?
Same time next year. I think I'm about halfway done with it.
Are you writing one for your own name and not the Mitch Rapp brand, your original brand?
No, Mitch is all I can handle. I can get one book done a year. I admire all my contemporaries. They can do 2 or 3, but I can't do it.
Yeah, Box does 2 a year. You and Silva and Brad do 1 a year. And so, it's an extraordinary accomplishment to keep it up. I'll talk to you, I hope, same time next year, Kyle Mills. Congratulations, Enemy at the Gates in bookstores now.
Thanks for having me on.
Thank you, sir. It's always fun to talk to thriller writers. I really do believe that they keep most of the American public clued in on what's going on at the highest levels. I have time to play Tim Scott on Face the Nation yesterday. Senator Scott from South Carolina sat down with Margaret Brennan, made a very important point about what's not going to be in this ridiculous red ink drenched expenditure of your children, your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren's money this week. We're not going to fund the police. Cut number 13.
It's just Republicans
the
not
funding
wanting
the police
to
is a
look
very
like they are being soft on crime ahead of the 2020
Of course
races.
not. That's the answer to the question. No.
Was that part of your calculation at all?
Not at all. Why would I be at a table? I'm the person who has lived in the communities that we're talking about. I'm the person who has experienced the challenges that we are trying to solve. I'm the person who understands and appreciates this issue intimately. If you want to keep our communities safe, you have to properly fund the police.
That is why Tim Scott is a formidable candidate in 2024. I think there's a top tier of 5 or 6. There's Tom Cotton, Ron DeSantis, Mike Pompeo. Obviously, the 3 heavyweights with military experience, the Harvard Law Club, the smart guys, and the young guys. One of them is a senator, one is a governor, one is a former Secretary of State and congressman. Tom Cotton's also a congressman. Ron DeSantis is also a congressman. They're like the A tier. And then the almost A tier is Tim Scott, Rick Scott, and Chris Christie. Tim Scott because of rhetorical prowess, Rick Scott because he's got the hardest working man in Washington when it comes to electing Republicans, Chris Christie because he's perceived as a friend of President Trump's and he is a brawler on stage and funny. I think then you've got the comeback kids, Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio, and anyone else who ran against President Trump in 2016 who may want to come back again. Nikki Haley is in that 3rd tier, and there's not much difference between them. Ted Cruz can raise more money than any of them, but it's starting. And this week, those who make effective presentations about what the Democrats are about to do, we already know what they did in Afghanistan, which is to destroy the liberty of millions of people in a bug out that will be a shameful episode, maybe the most shameful episode in modern American history. The abandonment of Afghanistan, the abandonment of the SIVs, the abandonment of American citizens and LPRs, probably the most shameful. But this is pretty shameful, stealing the future seed corn from 3 generations. That's happening this week and next in D.C. This is happening today, ReliefFactor.com. I took it in the first hour. I remind you about it in hours 2 and 3. Great sponsor of the show. Why do I remind you about it? Because I want you to be around for when the next Republican administration comes in 2024 or 2028. Not sure which one it'll be, but it'll be one of those two. The American people just don't stay with one party for very long, especially not one as incompetent and disorganized and completely profligate as this one. But you got to stay healthy to see what's going to happen next. And there's a lot happening in the world. What is Xi going to do? Is China, the real estate markets are on edge because they've cross-collateralized this empty 2008 fiscal crisis in China has been cross-collateralized with some American assets. So we have to wait and see the fever that is flying. Xi's just bringing down everyone in China. He's kind of a nut. He's kind of going full Mao cultural revolution, but doing it against the people who actually know how to make money in China. So they're on a kind of crazy course. He's going to. I think he's going to move against Taiwan after the Olympics are done. Just write me down as in that camp. But ReliefFactor.com will make sure that you're alive and healthy to see it all come along. Go get your booster. Go get your ReliefFactor.com. Come right back here on the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Trending now on the Charlie Kirk Show.
That there is a way that this could all be solved. That actually Republican states have the ability to solve this if they wanted to. Put Mayorkas aside, put the Biden bashing aside. I'm kind of tired of that, aren't you? I'm fatigued with governors going on cable television and saying, Biden regime is terrible and we need... Okay, enough of that, okay? Do something about it. And in fact, Texas showed that you can do something about it. If it gets so bad, it seemed as if local government stepped up and they secured the border. They created almost a perimeter around the Haitian criminal camp of border jumpers that have tried to come into our country. Now, some people in the media are saying, well, these are refugees. No, they are not. A refugee is someone who comes from a war-torn country that is facing imminent death, or their neighborhood or their home has been bombed and obliterated to smithereens. We are, in our hemisphere, there's no such country that qualifies as a refugee country in the traditional definition. Instead, these are economic migrants. These are people that are willing to break international law, willing to break American law to try to get a higher income. We've already asked the question, how did these people get from Port-au-Prince, Haiti, from the island of Hispaniola? If you look at the geography of where Hispaniola is, it is east of Cuba. Thousands of, I don't think thousands, probably 1,800 miles all the way to the eastern shore of Mexico, then to the border. Who's paying for this?
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today.
Streaming on Salem Now.
The public would be outraged if they knew the truth.
Why do you think our politicians are not on the sidewalk right now talking to you?
Don't have no respect.
The old wall randomly turns into a guardrail, followed by miles of open border.
Human trafficking bar.
That journey is extremely dangerous.
The 7-year-old girl died in the desert.
From the country of India.
A great pillar of the community was killed by a man who had been deported at least twice.
This little urn contains the ashes of my son. His dreams cut short forever.
We're so worried about other countries' problems, and we don't even focus on our own.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Which is even worse than being poor.
We would have sandwiches with no meat.
My American dream entailed working hard and making $20,000 a year. But I surpassed that goal and became a corporate CEO.
We'll all be able to say, free at last, free at last.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com. Streaming on Salem Now.
Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. The lead editorial this morning in the Wall Street Journal, which I have here in my hand, Pelosi goes for broke. Sometimes the headline is a joke, and that's a wink at us, because when they're done this week, the United States will be brokest that we've ever been in our history. In terms of percentage of GDP in the red, we will be the brokest we've ever been. The most money spent, the most debts owed, and the least to show for it, because of the decision by Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, driven by Bernie Sanders and AOC, to spend your money, your kids' money, your grandkids' money, your great-grandkids' money, all this week, $3.5 trillion. Maybe they'll end up cutting it to $3 trillion, maybe even $2.5 trillion. It's still, the big Obama stimulus was $850 billion in 2009, and that gave rise to the Tea Party, because people were aware, what are we doing? That's not our money. We're giving 4 generations worth of money to people who are not working right now to do things that we think they should do. It's suicide. It's economic suicide. It's inflationary disaster. It's high taxes. It's stagflation. It's the Democrat playbook. For a hamburger today, I will gladly pay you Tuesday. They want to give away goodies today, so they're going to give away the money of you for the rest of your life, your children for as long as they live, your grandchildren, and your yet unborn great-grandchildren. Going out the door this week in D.C., be aware of it. Coming up at the start of the third hour, John Bursch joins me. He's the head of appellate advocacy at the Alliance Defending Freedom. If you go to HughHewitt.com, at the very top, it's not yet October, right? It's September, what is it, the 27th. Been 3 days left in September, and October is the court month. I always try and raise money for Alliance Defending Freedom in October, but I'm starting early because the docket is full of religious liberty cases. John's going to talk to us about that. Alliance Defending Freedom protects the church that you attended yesterday, the Christian or Jewish or any sectarian school that your child goes to today, or your homeschool. They defend children in the womb. They defend children with their parents. They defend you. Mostly they defend your right to assemble and worship, your right to free association, your right to free speech. They're still defending Masterpiece Cake Shop because the hard left in Colorado will not leave Jack alone. They're still defending people everywhere who have deeply seated religious... They always win, by the way. They always win. And the reason it's very important this year to keep Alliance Defending Freedom fully funded is because Justice Amy Coney Barrett said in her concurrence this past year, we've got to overturn a case known as Smith. So we're going to do it. Justice Scalia's Employment Division versus Smith, his worst decision, maybe his only terrible decision, in which he said, law is applicable to everyone. If they burden religious freedom, so what? Well, that isn't the Constitution, and he was wrong. Then he overturned a standard that was evolving called the Sherbert Standard. And Barrett and Chief Justice Roberts and 4 other justices, they actually got 9 votes in the case last year. They're going to have to throw out Smith. And Justice Barrett said, we got to come up with a new set of rules for religious freedom. And that's going to be complicated. And she listed all the questions. Who's going to answer those questions in a fair way so that everybody in America understands their religious belief or non-belief is as protected in the eyes of the law as anybody else's. It's been the secret to the American liberty success, is that no establishment of religion, no paradigm of correctness, no authoritarian demand that you give money to this church or not to that church, nothing except the civic religion, which isn't a religion, it's patriotism, and a protection of all religious groups. All religious groups. And the Alliance Defending Freedom, since it was founded 30 years ago, has been the most effective legal defense fund in America. And I got a lot of them that I like. I like the Goldwater Center. I like the Pacific Legal Fund. I like the Capital Fund. There are lots of great legal defense groups. None of them have the breadth, depth, scope, fundraising success, next generation focus as Alliance Defending Freedom. So when I sit here and ask you to please contribute to ADF, I'm doing so as someone who gives a lot of our own time, talent, and treasure to ADF. Why? Because it works. Because without religious liberty, this country is not unique. It's not the shining city on the hill. The Taliban are a theocracy. Iran is a theocracy. We are a religious liberty-driven country from the time that Jefferson and Madison got together with the statute on religion in Virginia before the framing, into the Bill of Rights. That's what we are about, is tolerance for everyone and the protection of the right of everyone to believe as they believe in their ultimate design and purpose. So if you went to church yesterday, you should be contributing to ADF. It's part of your tithe. Just go there to HughHewitt.com. Wait for it to load at the very top. There it is, Alliance Defend. One-time gift, a monthly gift, whatever it is. If you want to protect America in this time of creeping government, the administrative state, go there and keep them in the field. Jonathan Burch joins me at the top of the hour from Alliance Defending Freedom. But during this break, head over to HughHewitt.com and dig deep. Be generous. It matters. It matters a lot. I'll be right back on The Hugh Hewitt Show.
Portions of The Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you by Alliance Defending Freedom.
Trending now on the Dennis Prager Show.
Because if America's not the world's policeman, there are two things that will happen. Bad people will become the world's policemen, or there will be no policemen and they will be just mass evil. I fully plead guilty to the belief that America has a moral role to play in this world. And especially when it is at such little sacrifice as it was for the last couple of years in Afghanistan. We lost more people to the suicide bombing when Joe Biden said we would leave. In that day, we lost more servicemen than in the last year and a half, all put together. We're opening a new era of relentless diplomacy. Is there anybody who understands what that means? Relentless diplomacy with whom? With the Taliban? Yeah. That's actually one of those that he has in mind. Using the power of our development aid to invest in new ways of lifting people up around the world. I must admit that I didn't understand most of his speech. That is one of the sentences. I have no idea what he was talking about. Number 23.
Over the last 8 months, I prioritized rebuilding our alliances, revitalizing our partnerships, and recognizing they're essential and central to America's enduring security and prosperity. We have reaffirmed our sacred NATO alliance to Article 5 commitment.
How many people in that audience understood Article 5 commitment? But in any event...
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Mike Gallagher Show.
It's hard not to weep for our country right now, isn't it? When you see these images of thousands of people camped out under makeshift sticks and branches and trees, it does look like a third world nation. It's Del Rio, Texas. It's the state of Texas in the United States of America. We're not a third world nation. But my Lord, we're being turned into one. And the assertion that this is intentional on the part of this Biden-Harris administration is very hard to dispute. They don't want to do anything about it. They want to complain about Border Patrol agents on horseback.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
Streaming on Salem Now.
The Democratic Party somehow has convinced black people that they're the good guys. Never mind the skanky history of the Democratic Party. That was a party of slavery.
He said, listen, I gotta give these niggas enough. Not too much, but enough that I have them voting Democrat for the next 200 years.
The race grievance industry would have you believe that blacks get up and think about nothing else except race.
If I tell you this is racist, yeah, I would get you emotional.
There is a whole big cottage industry for racism. If racism went away, a lot of people would be unemployed.
The mob during the Minneapolis riots following the death of George Floyd. A bunch of white thugs, frankly, burning down the city's traditional black and Asian business district.
They're racist, 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 racist. Everything's racist.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Trending now on The Larry Elder Show.
I saw the pictures. They were just grabbing them with their hands, and the reins are used to turn the horses. I was like, what? But this is what the left does. They fool people. If you're, okay, so I'm like, okay. If I'm on that border is being overwhelmed. I'm going a little crazy, okay? I'm going a little crazy. So maybe they got a little crazy, but maybe, you know what I mean? If we were in that situation, but no, come to find out, it was just another left-wing attack, another left-wing fiasco made to look like you heard Ilhan Omar saying that our country is systemically racist. Meanwhile, her black behind is on TV. Her black behind is in Congress shaping our nation into an anti-Semitic country but we're systemically racist. Meanwhile, this bigot is in Congress shaping our nation and turning our nation into a bunch of racists. I kid you not. I feel like every day I come into this studio, I feel like I'm checking the corner. Where's Ashton Kutcher? Because I feel like I'm being punked by the Democrats every day. Out there. Let's go to Joel in San Diego, California.
Yeah, man, 1996, everyone forgets 900 FBI files were found in the Clinton White House.
Good point.
And they've been in the pocket of the FBI for years.
Joe?
So this thing goes deep. We need a new untouchables to be reincarnated.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com. Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
I feel dumb asking this question. Is there any way to vet 120,000 Afghan quote-unquote refugees if they don't have any ID papers, Tom?
No. And let me tell you something. Let's just look at the facts. It takes, especially an immigrant visa, it takes 18 to 24 months to vet.
Yeah.
Right? Because CIS gets it, they send it to the chief of mission at the embassy. He has it for, at least 12, 13 months, and they go through all the Afghan records, right? It's a birth certificate legitimate. Is a passport legitimate? They got to go through all these certain documents and check numerous databases, including DOD databases. Is there any derogatory information on this person? Before this happened in Afghanistan, the regular process took 18 and 24 months. And here's the fact. 84% of SI visa requests were denied.
Wow.
And that's when they had time to actually vet them. So now they're trying to vet within days or weeks when they got no access. There is no chief of mission. There is no embassy over there. I don't know where the operator is. Do they have access to Afghan records anymore? Does the Taliban have it? How do they know what's a legitimate passport? Where do all the records for the Afghan government go? So we got no staff over there, no insight over there. We don't have access to Afghan paperwork. And I talked to people here at Dulles, law enforcement, that said some of these people show up as absolutely zero ID. How the hell can you possibly vet them? If you got an 84% denial rate when they have time, that tells you how full of fraud this whole system is.
So the idea that we are still safe, that this isn't being exploited by terrorists, that's just garbage, right, Tom?
We are scary unsafe.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe today at rumble.com.
These powerful organs of the state are not merely corrupt, but that they've been weaponized.
We are now all rooting for his success.
That's not what happened. It was a complete ambush.
I thought it's early enough. Let's just send a couple guys over.
And the audience was, ha, 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 ha. How funny to set up an innocent man.
It divided the country in ways that people can't imagine. It's inspired massive violence.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to Salem Now.
Every time you fall.
Every time I take one step forward.
When Wright came in this morning, he wants to fight you.
No one expected this out of him.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Morning, Glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. Hugh Hewitt live back inside the Beltway on this Monday. The interview with Hugh Hewitt today is with Jonathan Bursch. He is senior counsel and head of appellate advocacy for the Alliance Defending Freedom. Good morning, John. How are you?
I'm doing great, Hugh. Good to see you again, as always.
Good to see you. I want to embarrass you. I want to read your bio so that people know who I'm talking to. John Bursch is senior counsel and vice president of appellate advocacy with the Alliance Defending Freedom. Bursch has argued 12 U.S. Supreme Court cases and more than 30 state Supreme Court cases since 2011. And a recent study concluded that among all frequent Supreme Court advocates who did not work for the federal government, important, John had the third highest success rate for persuading justices to adopt his legal position. Bursch served as the Solicitor General for Michigan, sadly. Michigan, we'll overlook that. From 2011 to 2013, he's been in front of that Supreme Court a lot of times. That's a crazy Supreme Court. He's just represented everywhere and everything. He went to the University of Minnesota Law School, so he got out of Michigan for law school. And John has a magic trick. He looks like he's 25, but he's actually over 40. So is that a fair introduction, John?
I think that's a fair introduction, except I don't know about looking under 20.
Well, you did. You surprised us all when we were down in Florida. I've told my audience, this is my ADF month in October. When Alan Sears and the wonderful Paula Sears came to me years ago and said, we're working on ADF, can we sponsor your show? I said, come on in. I've been involved in Blackstone. I've been involved in the lawyers' meetings, the media track for a decade now, and I love it. But you were new this year for me. And I said, wow, that's the guy I want on the show when we ask people to send money to ADF, because you've got your fingers in every case. What is ADF doing this year that needs the support of this audience, John?
Well, we just filed a cert petition last week. For those in the audience who are not legal experts, the cert petition is the paperwork you submit to the U.S. Supreme Court to ask them to hear a case. And this important case involves Lori Smith and her company, 303 Creative. She's a website designer, and so she puts together unique websites for businesses, individuals, nonprofits by putting together text and pictures and video and things like that. And for a long time, to promote the meaning of Christian marriage, the way that she understands it in her faith between one man and one woman, she's wanted to create beautiful custom wedding websites. But she can't do that because she happens to live in Colorado. And Colorado still has the same law that they used to persecute Jack Phillips, the master cake baker, that says that if you discriminate against someone based on their orientation, that violates the law. And the way Colorado interprets that law, if Lori makes wedding websites, custom wedding websites for same-sex couples, for opposite-sex couples, then she must also make them for same-sex couples. What's more, that law prohibits her from even posting on her website an explanation of her religious beliefs and the websites that she can and cannot make. And so we went to court over this, and the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals, in an opinion that the dissenting judge, the chief judge of the 10th Circuit, called extraordinary, remarkable, novel, the 10th Circuit agreed that what she was doing was engaging in speech, that the Colorado law compelled her to speak the government's message, that it did so in a way that persecuted religious people and allowed secular people to decline to create websites based on their personal beliefs, and yet still said the government could do all that under strict scrutiny, because if you wanted to get a website from Lori, the only person you could get it from was Lori. Therefore, Lori had a monopoly over Lori's own websites, and the government could make her speak whatever it wanted to if it had an interest in doing so. It's an incredible decision. It conflicts with numerous Supreme Court cases and other decisions across the country. And we're very optimistic that the court will take this case and say once and for all that artists, creative professionals, speakers, all those in this space have a First Amendment free speech right not to be compelled to speak the government's message.
Jonathan Bursch, the problem for our audience is they get often confused because ADF defends free speech. It also defends religious liberty, and they are often the same thing. And it seems to me that the modern court prefers to decide these cases on free speech grounds, but eventually they're going to have to overturn Smith, and Justice Barrett said as much in the term just decided, and they're going to have to come up with a new rule. And this is why Alliance Defending Freedom matters so much in the years ahead. You have to help them craft the intellectual framework for a free exercise law, a rule of law, precedents that will be coherent. That's a big challenge. I've been teaching con law for 25 years. It's not easy. But that's the end game, isn't it? Helping the court get to something that protects all Americans in the exercise of their deeply held spiritual beliefs.
Yeah, I'm glad you raised that because although the primary argument in this case is a speech case, because Lori clearly engages in speech, the secondary argument is based on religious exercise and the free exercise clause of the First Amendment. And we take Smith head on and say that the court should overrule it and replace it with a better framework. You know, the problem with Smith is that if you've got a law that's neutral and generally applicable and was not enacted with religious animus, then religious people have to comply with it. And to give you just a very simple example of why that's wrong, say that you lived in a dry county that prohibited any consumption of alcohol. That means that religious service taking place on Sunday that wanted to offer communion wine would be prohibited from doing so. Now, the folks who drafted and ratified the free exercise clause in the First Amendment would not have dreamed that the government would have the power to stop a church from using wine at a church service on Sunday to celebrate communion. And yet here we are in 2021, the Supreme Court's Smith decision neuters the free exercise clause to allow that very type of regulation. And really, the framework for what replaces it doesn't have to be that complicated because we've got the Federal Religious Freedom Restoration Act law, RFRA, which for years has protected religious people from federal laws by essentially requiring that the government prove that it has a compelling interest and that it's pursuing it in the least narrowly or the most narrowly tailored way before it burdens religion. And if you simply applied that in the constitutional context, that would be the same rule that the Supreme Court itself applied for decades before Smith.
And so we can get there. And I want the entire audience to know, over at hughhewitt.com, my website, if you let it load at the top, there is a banner that says Support Alliance Defending Freedom, Support Religious Liberty. Please go and make a contribution. October is the month the court returns, and they're doing such great work. Jonathan Bursch, what is the ADF's record at the Supreme Court in the last decade?
Almost too many wins for me to count. We've got at least 12 wins on the merits where we were representing a party, including 2 cases last year. The Uzabunam case, you'll remember, involved the student whose free speech rights were violated on campus. And then the Thomas More Law Center case was the one involving compelled donor disclosure and that terrible rule in California. But in addition to that, we've been involved in a variety of different ways in more than 60 wins at the U.S. Supreme Court over our 25-year history. Just about any important religious liberty or free speech case that you can name, we played a role in some respect, if not directly representing the parties, then certainly assisting with amici briefs and moots and background support, communications, and things like that. For us, it's all about obtaining what we consider generational wins. These are the victories at the U.S. Supreme Court, like overturning Smith and replacing it with true free exercise protection that will protect not only this generation, but your kids and your grandkids, the generations to come, with a long-lasting foundational precedent. And that's what we're doing on an everyday basis.
Yesterday, Jonathan, our pastor preached on 1 Corinthians and the letter about foolishness, that the gospel is foolishness to people who are not being saved. And the ability to preach foolishness in an age of scientism, of the administrative state, is imperiled. And so if anyone went to church yesterday, of any denomination, or no denomination at all, they ought to consider a donation to ADF because you're out there protecting everyone. And I want that. I'm Catholic. I don't know. I think you're Catholic too. But the ADF has many, many, many evangelicals, many, many Jews, many, many Muslims supporting it because you guys support everybody who practices their faith. Fair statement?
That is a fair statement, absolutely. And our goal is not just to win court cases, but it's to keep the doors open for the spread of the gospel. And we do that by winning these cases that allow people to be able to live their faith in the public square, because we believe, as you do, that the most perilous thing that you can do is not believe that there is a God and not be striving for heaven. I mean, how depressing to be going through life and thinking that once your life was over, that was it, that was just the end of things, and this didn't really have any greater meaning or significance. But at the same time, we recognize that the Bible promises that when you spread the gospel, that there will be persecution, and there's going to be hate, and there's going to be difficult times. No one said that it was going to be easy. Picking up the cross is a big job, and there's going to be suffering involved with that. But we want to make sure that for every individual who wants to be able to carry that cross across that they can do so without the government restricting their rights. And that's
yeah,
really,
it's hard enough as it is, right? It's hard enough as
it is hard
without the vast federal government coming at you with unlimited resources, and in particular, the insanity of the Colorado court. I want to go there, but I want to first set up for people how broad and deep is the ADF effort. Because you said 25 years since Alan and Paula got it going. How many lawyers are now involved? How big is the staff? How many cases? How much does it cost? Because people say, why do you need the money? And I tell them, you have no idea what the Alliance Defending Freedom does. It's like running a law firm for free and not billing anyone. It's an impossible undertaking.
Well, that's one of the hallmarks of what we do, is that we represent everyone pro bono. So nothing out of pocket for Laurie Smith and 303 Creative, or Jack Phillips and Masterpiece Cake Shop, or any of the other many wonderful clients and organizations that we represent. Just at the Supreme Court stage alone in a case, you can spend hundreds of thousands of dollars, up to $1 million, to prosecute a Supreme Court case. So when you're taking a case from the beginning until the end, you're easily talking $2 million in a contentious case. And we get, in an average year, 10,000 calls for help for people who are being persecuted because of their religious liberty or their speech, or because they want to protect innocent, nascent life in the womb. So we have a substantial staff. We have about 75 attorneys in the United States, but a staff approaching 300, because a lot of that is communication, culture building, which we consider just as important as changing the legal system. You've got to change the hearts and minds of people everywhere about the importance of speech and life and religious exercise. And that's only the tip of the iceberg, because we also have an international organization that advocates in the European Court of Human Rights and the European Union and the Helsinki Commission and all kinds of other places, including having attorneys on the ground in Europe and in India, many other places. You mentioned the Blackstone program that's here and abroad, where we train young lawyers to understand the importance of free speech and religious exercise, so that they can then go out and help us with those types of cases. We have more than 3,300 allied attorneys around the world who similarly, on a pro bono basis, assist us with these many calls that we receive. So bar none, we are the largest public interest law firm dedicated to pursuing free speech, free exercise, and the protection of human life anywhere in the world. And unfortunately, that takes money, but we're able to do that with the generous support of many ministry friends.
I also wanted to explain to people something that ADF does, the Alliance Defending Freedom does, that no other advocacy group does as well, which is annually they go and find influencers in the media. Now, we used to call them reporters, and now we just call them influencers, because people have influence, like from the Daily Signal, Ben Shapiro's group, or they're never on TV, but they're always on the air, or they are on the radio, or they are writing columns, and they gather them at the same time that the Lawyers Conference gathers, and they try and educate non-lawyers into religious liberty, which ought not to be that hard to do, since while Madison and Jefferson were learned in the law, they did not write for a legal audience when they wrote the Virginia statute. They did not write for a legal audience when they put forward the set of amendments that became the Bill of Rights. And so trying to educate communicators on the value of religious liberty is something that ADF does, and I think very successfully, John. And Jonathan, I don't think many other legal defense firms look up from their briefs to do this.
Well, that's why we've got so many folks on this communication side of the organization, because we understand that ultimately the court is going to follow the trajectory of the culture. And so if the culture is sloughing off into degradation and religious oppression and speech oppression and the taking of innocent life, that eventually the courts are going to pick up and they're going to follow that and do the same. That perfect example of that is Obergefell. The U.S. Supreme Court does not make up a right to same-sex marriage under the Constitution, which is silent about marriage entirely, unless the culture has moved there first. And so that's why it's so important to educate journalists so they can talk about these issues in a way that's consistent with the true meaning of the Constitution and that will protect everyone's rights. And it's important to remember that when you protect religious exercise, when you protect free speech, that's not just protecting a particular minority of individuals. It protects everybody. That's why these rights are enshrined in the Constitution. And just as I'm hoping that people will respect our clients' ability to speak and live out their faith in the public square, the types of decisions that we get are going to protect anybody. You could be the atheist, and it'll protect your speech in the public square as well. Because when you live in a pluralistic, democratic society like the United States, if you can't speak openly about your beliefs, then you cannot have a pluralistic democracy. And unfortunately, we're seeing today a total breakdown in that civility and public discourse. Now it's not the right to be able to speak, but the right to shut you down. There was a survey that I saw come out just last week that showed that nearly 30% of college students think that it's okay to shout down a person who's trying to exercise their free speech rights on campus. So that this wokeism is making everybody's job more difficult, and that's the cultural mindset that we need to change desperately.
Jonathan Bursch, senior counsel for Alliance Defending Freedom. The Chief Justice is a friend. I've known Justice Thomas since 1983. I've interviewed Justice Gorsuch and Justice Breyer. I know the court well enough, but I sometimes am frustrated by the fact that Jack Phillips is a martyr to the pace of Supreme Court litigation. Barronelle Stutzman is a martyr. She's losing her business, is in danger of going away because the court can't act fast enough. Do you think the court has sufficient urgency? Colorado continues to persecute just ordinary Christians. That doesn't fit the woke culture of Colorado right now. Do you think they get the urgency behind these cases?
Well, we're certainly letting them know the urgency in this new 303 creative cert petition. We reminded them that Jack Phillips, after winning in the U.S. Supreme Court the first time, was immediately sued again. He turned down a request for a gender transition celebration custom cake that was made on the very day that the Supreme Court directed that oral argument be heard in his case. No coincidence there. And he lost that trial in the Colorado State Court. And so we're continuing to represent him. He's been in litigation for about a decade now. We reminded them about Barronelle Stutzman. We reminded them about Elaine's photography and many, many other individuals who continue to suffer from woke government persecution. So I think that this is the time. Now, a good conservative justice on the Supreme Court recognizes that the law is best changed incrementally. I mean, as conservatives, that's something that we support. We don't want radical changes in the law because that upsets the fabric of society. And if you bite off more than you need to, then sometimes you end up making mistakes. That's what happened in the Smith case. And so slow but steady is the conservative mantra for legal change. But this has gone on long enough. The court has already signaled in Masterpiece Cake Shop that it wants to hear and decide these issues involving artists and creative professionals, those who try to speak in a way consistent with their faith. And this is the time to protect everybody. And all it takes is one ruling in Lori Smith's case, and you won't have any more Jack Phillips or Barronelle Stutzmans, and it's time.
It takes one ruling as well to once and for all say the many Blaine amendments are unconstitutional expressions of anti-Catholicism that have existed like the appendix in body politic, useless artifacts of long ago outburst of anti-religious fervor. And so it takes one case, but that case, we don't know when it's going to come. You have to stay in the field. And then we're going to find state governments that refuse to give in, and wild judges and district court judges and appeals court judges who refuse to go along with the court. So I don't think you're ever going to be out of work, Jonathan, do you?
You know, as long as there are people on this earth who want to keep religious people out of the public square, they don't want to hear from them, they don't want their beliefs to be accepted by mainstream society, we will continue to have work to do. And unfortunately, in this cultural climate, things have been getting worse, not better. And that makes the need for us to be actively engaged in changing the culture and changing the legal system all the more important.
But the great news, and I really do mean it's great news, and ADF has built it, is that there's a lot of talent. There's a lot of legal talent that gets trained in Blackstone, goes to work as volunteer lawyers, comes to work on the ADF staff, comes to seminars to learn, knows how to communicate. It's really quite a magnificent organization of which you're a part. I'm glad you're there and out of Michigan, Jonathan, and we forgive you for your sin from coming from the state up north. But good luck in the term ahead. I know it's a very challenging one. We will follow the 303 case very, very closely. And good luck in the state courts and the federal courts you're litigating across, and prayers for your success. But friends, money talks. All right, your prayers are always needed and, in fact, coveted, but we also need your money. So head over to HughHewitt.com, go to the very top, Alliance Defending Freedom pops up there once a year during October. This is the month, the first Tuesday following the first Monday in October, that the court reconvenes and it's the first Monday in October that they return. It's the presidential election, which is the first Tuesday after the first Monday. I should know my Constitution. Jonathan, thank you. ADF's banner is at the top of HughHewitt.com. Please be generous. I'll be right back. News and headlines as they occur live inside the Beltway. I'm Hugh Hewitt.
Trending now on the Charlie Kirk Show.
The front page of the New York Times, the alleged paper of record. All the news that's fits to print, Pravda says. Front page of the New York Times says, Manhattan is buoyed as Google buys a building for $2.1 billion. New York Times also says, Trump campaign new vote case was groundless. This is what the New York Times is covering today. The paper of record. They're also covering Biden's speech at the United Nations, which we will cover a little bit. There's not that much there to cover, as he read from a teleprompter. Instead, we're going to cover the imminent invasion happening in our country. We already have had 1.8 million people illegally cross the paper of record. All the news that's fits to print, Pravda says. Front page of the New York Times says, Manhattan is buoyed as Google buys a building for $2.1 billion. New York Times also says, Trump campaign new vote case was groundless. This is what the New York Times is covering today. The paper of record. They're also covering Biden's speech at the United Nations, which we will cover a little bit. There's not that much there to cover, as he read from a teleprompter. Instead, we're going to cover the imminent invasion happening in our country. We already have had 1.8 million people illegally cross into our country this year. 1.8 million. Cutting in line, border jumping, breaking the law. These are criminals, and they should be treated as criminals. This is designed disorder by the Biden regime. And only thanks to Fox News stumbling across this and publicizing it do we even know this is happening. And in some of the coverage on Tucker Carlson's wonderful show, there was something that was said by Bill Magulin that I think was quite revealing. Something that I think exposed how this could actually be solved. That many people are upset that the southern border is wide open, but we feel powerless. We feel helpless. In fact, we are told that unless the Biden regime steps up and does something, there's nothing we can do.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on the Dennis Prager Show.
We've ended 20 years of conflict in Afghanistan. And as we close this period of relentless war, we're opening a new era of relentless diplomacy, of using the power of our development aid to invest in new ways of lifting people up around the world.
I love that. We've ended 20 years of conflict in Afghanistan. That's not true. We've ended 20 years of American troops in Afghanistan. We have not ended 20 years of conflict in Afghanistan. I wish we did. The Taliban has taken over. That is exactly that would be like saying if Churchill had decided not to fight Hitler any longer. Well, we've ended all these years of conflict with Germany. Except when you have tyrants in charge, violent tyrants, you have not ended conflict. You have only ended your role in it. It shows the statement is fascinating. It's so incorrect that it really demands explanation. Why would somebody say something so incorrect? We have not ended 20 years of conflict. we have ended 20 years of American engagement, or at least direct engagement. And that is because basically most people, and I even include a lot of conservatives, really don't give a damn about Afghans. Something I've never quite understood. I am forthright about this. I think America should be the world's policeman.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today.
His most amazing discoveries thought to be written in a lost journal. Now, in the right hands, it could revolutionize the 21st century.
Every time you fall.
Every time I take one step forward.
When Wright came in this morning, he wants to fight you.
No one expected this out of him.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Welcome back, American Hugh Hewitt. That's Five for Fighting, John Androsik. I and the fetching Mrs. Hewitt went to hear him last night at the Bursch over in Alexandria, Virginia. And it's a venue inside the Beltway, which has been open since 1966. Pretty small house, probably 400 people. But I've heard John many times play, and this was a very special concert. September concerts are. He's sort of the September songwriter, because of that song, Superman, which he performed at the concert for New York after 9/11. He also wrote Tuesday. He's written, he's done 100 events for USO, going out with the troops. He's done the album for the troops. He's a very big supporter of the American military. But he's also deeply invested in freedom. I wouldn't say he's political. He's a very moral songwriter, and he is just aghast at what we've done in Afghanistan. He wrote Blood on My Hands, which is really shocked. It's a gut punch of a song. It's shocked, and he played it in an encore. His backup, not his backup, his string quartet that accompanies him left the stage, and John explained, this is not a political song, it's a moral song. I wrote it when my friend called me, who was involved with the Underground Railroad in Afghanistan, needing help, and he was so aghast at President Biden's extraordinary success speech that he wrote Blood on My Hands, which we'll go out with. And he talked about it through the whole concert, but he mostly talked about September 11th and the September songbook. And whenever he performs in September, the songbook changes. Of course, he plays Superman Always in 100 Years and chances. I mean, he's got 350 different gigs in music. You've heard his music everywhere, and you've heard his, pull up 100 Years for a second, will you? I think this is his greatest song, and people hear it. Right, you hear that in the background when you're shopping. It's like the dentist music everywhere. It's the all-time soundtrack in America. And so he played it last night. But more important than that, he talked about the 20 years after 9/11, and everything we said we wouldn't do, we have done. We've just forgotten. And we are going to fade it down. We are going to end up attacked again. And we're going to end up with another Tuesday morning, another one of the songs he performed. John is in Annapolis tonight at the Ram's Head. I've never been there, so I don't know what that's like. But I can tell you that his September concerts are just amazing. And even though Larry O'Connor will be there, it will still be good to go to. I want to turn to the headline of the morning. Frustration with Biden. This is from Politico. Moderate Democrats expected Biden to start twisting House progressives' arms during their White House meeting last week, but were told by sources in the progressive camp and another senior Democratic aide that the president neither asked progressives to drop their demand that the reconciliation bill pass in tandem with the infrastructure bill, nor pressed them to accept a standalone vote on the infrastructure bill. This has infuriated moderates. The president needs to pick up the phone and call people, the moderate source close to the talks told us. The president argued The White House has been in listening mode for too long and needs to bang heads to get this vote over the finish line this week. It's not just the moderates who are dismayed. There are a lot of mistakes happening, said a senior Democratic aide Sunday night. There is no whip effect for the infrastructure. Everything is hanging by a thread. Biden needs to be more engaged. Good luck with that. Biden needs to be more engaged. And so the papers, this is basically a company town, and the company town wants to spend $3.5 trillion that's not its money. Company town is just drunk on money that's not theirs. Imagine I gave you $3.5 trillion. So much money you can't even imagine. So go ahead and spend it on whatever you want. Go ahead. Go to town. Not your money, spend it. Well, they're out securing their votes. I mean, they're getting their seats, Bill. So we've got the Wall Street Journal. Congress heads into tumultuous week, pressured by converging deadlines. New York Times. For Schumer and Pelosi, the challenge of a career with no margin for error. Silly drama. From the Washington Post, Democrats outside D.C. worry that the party will blow its chance of enacting historic agenda, a failure with grave consequences, political consequences. They ought to be more afraid of passing this nightmare, because when people get their tax bills and they find out that they've done away with stepped-up bases and they have to pay capital gains on the house that they paid off 10 years ago and that they've owned for 40 years and is appreciated from a $200,000 house to $1 million house because it's a little tract house in San Clemente, California, or San Mateo, California, or Pleasanton, California, or any place on Long Island or any place in Florida, they're going to get whacked. The kids are going to have to sell the house. They're going to have to pay 40% of it in state and local taxes, and it's just going to get whacked. That's what Democrats are going to end up with, a nightmare bill. And then people are going to say, where's the money? Whereas just like the Obama stimulus, you can't find anything that was built with the Obama stimulus. Nothing. Not the Works Progress Administration of FDR's years. Had nothing to do with that. It is a giant entitlement program to people you will never meet, and they won't even know they're getting the money. It's just Pelosi thinks it's historic. Joe Biden appears to believe anything he's told at this point. We don't really know. He doesn't come out. He goes to Delaware. We don't really know. Ross Douthat yesterday raising the question, which I raised 2 weeks ago, is he infirm? I mean, normally presidents talk once every couple of months. I mean, Donald Trump talked every day. President Trump talked to reporters every day. Sometimes it wasn't sparkling rhetoric, but it was always engaged energy out there working the line, trying to make his case. The daily press conferences with COVID, with Fauci and Deborah Birx and Vice President Pence and Surgeon General. Daily did too much Trump. We've gone the other way. We always go the other way. From too much president to no president at all. I really do mean. I think the Oval Office is vacant. I do. And I think that Ross Douthat raised the uncomfortable question, why is Kamala Harris being set up with all these meetings with foreign leaders? He asked that in the New York Times yesterday. The question is, do they fear she's going to have to take over? That's the speculation Ross has fueled yesterday. And I think he's infirm. I don't think he's incapacitated. I think he tires easily like old people. I don't think he likes to work very hard. I think he's fixed in his ideas. He doesn't know what to do with this $3.5 trillion. This isn't a normal bill. This isn't a compromise between 4 or 5 different groups that he's been doing for 50 years. He got muscle memory for. This is more money than we've ever spent in a single bill in the history of the United States. In fact, it's more money than any 2 bills combined, and that includes the COVID reliefs. It also changes basic entitlement structure. It is a nightmare. The best thing that could happen to this country is that it collapse. They will end up passing a continuing resolution with Democratic votes stripped of the debt limit. They will go back and amend the budget resolution to provide for a debt limit hike. So they're going to own the hike of the debt limit that they need to pay, not only for everything that's already been paid for, but looking forward to the future debt that will accrue. We're going to have gone from $20 trillion in debt to $30 trillion in debt in the short, lifeless presidency of Joe Biden. The only thing for which is memorable right now is the abandonment of American citizens and green card holders behind enemy lines. We left people behind. That is the Biden legacy. Just like Barack Obama's legacy is no red lines leading to the Syrian genocide, pulling American troops out of Iraq leading to ISIS, the Iran nuclear deal leading to a theocratic Iran threatening Israel with its existence and the United States and exporting terrorism. That's the Obama legacy, and $850 billion spent with no appreciable effect. The Biden legacy is going to be the Afghanistan bug out and $7 trillion spent with no appreciable effect. No Abraham Accords, nothing. No containment of China, no expansion of the Navy, nothing. There's no defense spending in this $7 trillion of hose down America with money program. $2 trillion already, $1.5 trillion in infrastructure spending pending, and $3.5 trillion teed up. The total of $7 trillion in 8 months. It makes World War II, all of it. It dwarfs World War II. We were fighting the Axis powers on all the seas of the world, on every continent of the world. And we're going to spend more money on, it's unfathomable to me how we're going to spend this much money. You couldn't spend it. You could build new schools in every city in America with this kind of money. Absolutely brand new schools. You could fund all the unfunded pension liabilities of America, completely fund the crazy stuff that we've done and move them to a new system. You could accomplish so much money with it, and it's going to be wasted. Absolutely, positively, 100% wasted. And Nancy Pelosi took to the TV yesterday to explain what she's doing. Can I play cut number 11?
Well, Chuck Schumer and I and Secretary Yellen the other day came forward in a press event and said that we had reached a framework of agreement. People said, well, what are the specific? Well, we'll see what we need. We'll see how the number comes down and what we need in that regard. But we have agreed on an array of pay-fors in the legislation. This will be paid for. So when some say, oh, well, what about inflation? It will be paid for. And that's the beauty of it, by having those in our economy and society who have not paid their fair share, paying their fair share. So again, the Senate and the House, those who are not in full agreement with the president's rate, let's see what our value, let's not talk about numbers and dollars, let's talk about values.
She is lying to you. She is lying to you. The people who are going to pay for this, small business owners who built it and employed people to pay payroll taxes forever. Their businesses will not pass to their children. They will be taxed out of existence. Middle-class homeowners who did the right thing, bought a house 30 years ago, paid it off over 30 years. It's gone up in value because real estate's gone up in value. They're going to get hammered because of the doing away with stepped-up bases. Corporate taxes are going to go up. They'll be passed on to you, inflationary cycle. Now, let me tell you about AndrewandTodd.com, and here's where you'll get the real impact. Sponsors of the show. But every day I come on and tell you, if you're buying a home or you're refinancing, go to AndrewandTodd.com, 888-888-1172. Go quick. This morning I started the show. The 10-year Treasury was at 1.4. 2 hours later, it's 1.506%. 3 weeks ago, it's at 1.2%. Okay, do the math, you Steelers fans. 20% increase in 3 weeks in the 10-year Treasury. What's that mean? What's that mean? That means that your interest rate for borrowing money to buy a home is going up every day, which is why you need to go to andrewandtodd.com today and ask them to help you refinance or buy a house, or call them at 888-888-1172. If you're a senior and you've been thinking about getting a reverse mortgage, get the cash out of your house, really, you cannot wait. You have to call andrewandtodd.com today at 888-888-1172. Because this 10-year Treasury is the canary in the coal mine for 30-year mortgage rates. And it's going up, up, up. Why? Because this bill, this profligate, ridiculous, absurd bill that will wipe out the Democrats for a generation, that's the only good thing about it. It's going to wipe out Democrats everywhere when people get the bill. And Nancy Pelosi doesn't care. She's quitting. She's a lame duck. Chuck Schumer doesn't care because it keeps AOC from challenging him. You care. I care. Everyone should care. Call your senator in Arizona, call Kristen Sinema, and say, no, 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 no. Don't do this. Then go to relieffactor.com and say, yes, 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 yes. Why? Why? Because you want to live long to see how this shakes out. You want to see the crushing blowback Democrats are going to suffer at the midterms. You're going to want to watch Raphael Warnock lose and Maggie Hansen lose, and Mark Kelly get blown out in Arizona. You're going to want to watch Cortez Masto in Nevada get blown out by Adam Laxalt. So get your relieffactor.com, $19.95, 3-week starter pack, and live a long time. Live 45 more years, even if you're 70. Why? Because you want to go with the new modern medicine and relieffactor.com and exercise and be here to see how long Democrats are out of power because of this week. This week and next week. They will be out of power for a generation when they're done. ReliefFactor.com. Josh Kraushaar from Hotline Josh on Twitter joins me next from the National Journal. Stay tuned.
The most powerful organs of the state are not merely corrupt, but that they've been weaponized to go after perceived domestic enemies. And that's very scary.
Our constitutional democracy enshrines the peaceful transfer of power.
We are now all rooting for his success. The peaceful transition of power is one of the hallmarks of our democracy.
We don't live in the United States of America as any of us would like to understand it.
We have a peaceful transition of power process. That's not what happened.
They interviewed General Flynn, and they did it in what was a complete ambush.
I thought it's early enough. Let's just send a couple guys over.
And the audience was, ha, 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 ha. How funny to set up an innocent man.
This is what third world security states do. They spy on their political opponents like this.
This is part of a concerted Russian influence operation.
Russian interference.
They colluded. They were in on it.
He would constantly say, I have seen evidence of collusion.
Until this is released, I can't comment. I can't go into the particulars.
Russians, I'm not going to be specific as.
But he knew he could just say it on TV and then hide behind, well, it's all classified, I can't get into it.
Well, it's classified. You can't see it. Collusion. You just got to be willing to see it.
New York's Daily News ran this front page, Trump is Hitler.
How could 62 million Americans vote for Hitler? Are 62 million Americans Nazis?
We really almost thought it was a joke. Like, really, you're not going to accept that you lost this election?
Then they see the Russia collusion narrative sitting right there in front of them and say, why don't we just say that he cheated?
It divided the country in ways that people can't imagine. It's inspired massive violence. It's given people who are bad faith actors a license to do whatever they want because they literally feel like they're fighting Russian spies and Nazis.
Russiagate has been the most egregious abuse of everything that was supposed to have been good about our government.
The thing that they were investigating the Trump campaign for is what they themselves were doing.
Streaming on Salem Now.
¿Cuánto queda?
No queda nada. Que lo siento mucho.
That's the only time you can come to Christ, when the Spirit of God calls you to the cross. Don't you hesitate.
Have you ever thought of going to seminary?
Madre, Padre, ¿quién está listo para ser transformado por el poder de su palabra?
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. That's Five for Fighting. Blood in My Hands. Great performance by John Andrusik at the Birchmere last night. And he's going up to Annapolis to the Ram's Head tonight. I believe it's called the Ram's Head. Josh Kraushaar of Hotline Josh fame on Twitter, the National Journal's own Josh joins me. Good morning, Josh. How are you?
Good. Good morning, Hugh.
I don't understand what Democrats think they're doing. It's like the San Francisco Democrats and the New York City Democrats have gotten together in the forms of Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer and agreed to destroy the party. When they're done this week and next, I believe they will have set up an epic wipeout in 2022. What do you think?
What I don't get, and I wrote about this in my column last week, is why President Biden isn't engaging more on the side of the moderates. Because the only politically palatable way there's going to be any reconciliation and any spending on the social spending side along with the infrastructure is if the progressives take a half loaf, if they lower their ambitions, if they work with the moderates to get the infrastructure bill passed and see if they can get 50 votes in the Senate, see if they can get a majority in the House later on for the bigger spending bill. But Biden is holding his own bill that has already passed the Senate on a bipartisan basis, essentially hostage. And he needs a political victory badly. It doesn't matter what the progressives want. He needs to use the political capital, well, what's left of it at least, to try to get these progressives in line, enough of them at least, in line with his own initiative. And I'm surprised, it was reported in Politico this morning that he's leaning towards siding with the progressives on going to shoot the moon and trying to go for the big spending. So, look, the risk of that is that this could all blow up if there's not enough compromise made. And I think the burden is on the progressive Democrats in the House. Then he could lose everything, and that would be you're right, that would be a very ugly political outcome.
No, I do not believe there's much of a chance of the Democrats falling apart completely. I think they'll pass something, and I'm expecting $2.5 trillion is kind of the budget resolution authorized $1.5 trillion in deficit spending. So they don't even have to raise any taxes. They can just print money for $1.5 trillion plus, and that's the infrastructure. They'll raise the highest marginal tax rate to 39.6. They'll raise corporate taxes. They'll get some money to spend. I just can't imagine them blowing it all up. That, nevertheless, will be more money in 1 year than we've ever spent in red ink, including the World War II years. And inflation isn't an imaginary thing, Josh. The Democrats are actually, they're stunning in their obliviousness to what is happening to the average American.
Yeah, I mean, I think not just the spending, but just reorienting the approach of government towards kind of letting government be a backstop versus, the frontline defense on childcare, on community college, on everything. It would reorient the American economy in a much different and much more progressive way. I actually am surprised, Hugh, that there hasn't been as much Republican mobilization against the proposed legislation. You don't see the town hall meetings where you have conservatives yelling at lawmakers, Democratic lawmakers. You don't have the grassroots organizations popping up, the Tea Party groups like we saw in 2009 for a much higher number of spending, as you rightly note. I mean, that's what Democrats are sort of betting on, that even though this is a big price tag, that there won't be as much opposition because ultimately President Trump spent a whole lot of money, and ultimately the Republican Party has been reoriented on more sort of cultural opposition towards liberal issues rather than the classic economic conservatism that so many Republican politicians have run on.
Well, to respond, I think inflation will bring the fiscally sane back to the fold in a large way. But more importantly, I think the Afghanistan debacle just stunned the country. And you didn't have a Tea Party August like you did in 2009 because I just believe we're traumatized. We've never lost a war so spectacularly. We've never bugged out on American citizens in LPRs. And Joe Biden won't talk about it. The Sunday shows won't talk about it. But Americans are talking about it. I talked about it with Salena Zito to this day. I heard it last night at the concert, Fight for Fighting concert. People talk. It's an embarrassment. It's a disgrace, Josh. And Americans are seared by it.
Yeah, I share your concerns. I also think it was more for a political perspective. It was sort of the gateway to understanding that this administration may not be as competent and as advertised, maybe not be as compassionate as advertised with how they've handled the situation, and also their sort of detachment from the Americans and green card holders still left behind that have been sort of ignored in the last week or two. So yeah, I mean that I think Afghanistan opened up a window to a lot of the problems that were going on internally in the Biden White House, and that's a scar that's not going to go away.
You cannot notice the president not talking to people for a long time unless there's a crisis. And when there's a crisis, you definitely notice that the president is not talking to people. Ross Douthat wrote about this. Last question, Josh. Do you think he's actively engaged in the presidency, or is, in effect, the Oval Office vacant?
I mean, he's engaged. I mean, he had media. I mean, it depends on what you mean by engaged. But anyone who's 79 years old isn't going to have the same energy as they had in their 60s when Biden was vice president. That's inevitable. He's engaged in the fact that he is holding meetings. He's doing this, he's giving the occasional address, but you can tell that he's not as vigorously engaged as other past presidents. He's not spending his political capital, and he's afraid to challenge, use the political capital to take on the left of the party. I
think he's exhausted. I think he's exhausted, and how that plays out this week, we'll find out. Josh Kraushaar, follow him at Hotline Josh on Twitter. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Generalissimo. I'll be back tomorrow on the next live Hugh Hewitt Show.